I should have known something was wrong when Megan started being nice to me. After 6 months of living together, she'd suddenly transformed from someone who labeled her yogurt to someone who brought me coffee in the morning. The change coincided perfectly with my bonus hitting my bank account, a fact I discovered she knew when she confronted me that Tuesday evening. "So," she said, sliding onto the couch next to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I saw the deposit notification on your phone this morning. $11,000. That's amazing." My stomach dropped. I'd left my phone on the kitchen counter while showering, forgetting that my banking notifications showed previews on the lock screen. "That's my year-end bonus," I said carefully. "Our year-end bonus," she corrected, her smile growing wider. "Remember our agreement? Everything 50-50? My name is Jessica, and I'm a 28-year-old marketing director at a tech startup. When I'd moved to Seattle a year ago, finding affordable housing had been a nightmare. Megan's Craigslist ad for a roommate seemed like a godsend: beautiful apartment, reasonable rent, and she seemed normal during our interview. We'd agreed to split all household expenses 50-50, rent, utilities, groceries, cleaning supplies, standard roommate stuff. But apparently, Megan had a very different interpretation of our agreement. "Megan, we agreed to split expenses, not income. That's my bonus from my job." Her face darkened. "Don't play dumb, Jessica. We're roommates. We share everything. That's what we agreed to." "No," I said firmly. "We agreed to split the cost of living together, not our paychecks. That's insane." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of our handwritten roommate agreement. "See? Right here. All finances split 50-50ths. That includes your bonus." I looked at the photo. The agreement said all household finances split 50-50ths. She'd conveniently cropped out the word household in her photo. "Nice try," I said, getting up to retrieve the original document from my room. "But the actual agreement says household finances, as in, expenses related to the apartment, not our personal income." Her mask finally slipped completely. "I don't care what it says. We've been living as equals for 6 months. I've been subsidizing your lifestyle while you've been hiding money from me." "Subsidizing my lifestyle?" I was incredulous. "Megan, I pay exactly half of everything. How is that subsidizing?" "You make more than me," she shouted. "I'm a barista making minimum wage while you're pulling in corporate money. It's only fair that we equalize things. If you wanted income-based splitting, you should have mentioned that when we signed the lease. You can't retroactively change our agreement because you saw my bonus." $5,500, she said coldly. "That's my half. I expect it by Friday, or I'll take action." "What kind of action?" I asked, though I was already mentally calculating how quickly I could find a new place. "You'll see," she said ominously, then stormed off to her room. I immediately called my friend Lisa, who was a paralegal. "She can't actually do anything, right? Legally? No, your bonus is yours. But Jess, if she's this unhinged about money, you need to be careful, document everything, and maybe look for a new place." I took Lisa's advice and started apartment hunting that night. I also took photos of all my belongings, backed up our text conversations, and made copies of all our agreements and lease documents. Call it paranoia, but Megan's transformation from annoying roommate to financial predator had me on edge. Wednesday morning, I left for work early, hoping to avoid another confrontation. Megan was already gone. She usually started her barista shift at 5 a.m. I spent the day trying to focus on work while fielding texts from her that grew increasingly aggressive. "I've been thinking about this all night. It's not just the bonus. You owe me back pay for the income disparity. I calculated it. With your salary versus mine over 6 months, you owe me $8,000 on top of the bonus split. This is about fairness, Jessica. Don't be greedy. I know you're reading these. Ignoring me won't make this go away." I screenshot everything and forwarded it to Lisa, who advised me to not engage. "Let her dig her own hole," she said. "The more she texts, the more evidence you have of her harassment." At lunch, I took a break from apartment hunting to grab coffee. By pure coincidence, or maybe not, Megan was working the counter at the coffee shop. "Jessica," she called out loudly, causing other customers to turn. "Have you thought about my proposal?" "This isn't the place, Megan," I said quietly. "Oh, I think it is," she said, her voice carrying across the shop. "Everyone should know what kind of person you are, making 6 figures while your roommate struggles, refusing to share your windfall. Some feminist you are." Her manager appeared. "Megan, is there a problem?" "No problem," she said sweetly, "just explaining to my roommate here about income inequality." I left without ordering, my face burning. but I made sure to note the time and date, more documentation for the harassment file I was building. When I got home that evening at 6:30, my key wouldn't work, the lock had been changed. I stood there for a moment, processing what had happened, then I called Lisa. She changed the locks? Lisa's voice was sharp. That's illegal, call the police, now, I'll meet you there. While waiting for the police, I knocked on my neighbor Tom's door. He was a retired teacher who'd always been friendly. Tom, did you see Megan today? She changed the locks and I can't get in. His face darkened. I saw her around noon with someone who looked like a locksmith. I thought it was strange since she was supposed to be at work. She said you'd lost your key and asked her to handle it. Could you tell that to the police when they arrive? She's locked me out illegally. Of course, this is outrageous. Want to wait in my apartment? The police arrived within 20 minutes, followed closely by Lisa. I explained the situation, showing them my lease, my ID with the address, and the text messages from Megan demanding money. Ma'am, your roommate cannot legally change the locks without your consent, Officer Martinez said. Do you have her phone number? We need to contact her to resolve this. I called Megan and put her on speaker. What? Megan, this is Officer Martinez with Seattle PD. You need to return to the apartment immediately and provide Ms. Jessica with access to her legal residence. There was a long pause. I don't have to do anything. She hasn't paid her fair share. Ma'am, that's a civil matter. Illegally evicting someone is a criminal matter. Return to the apartment now, or we'll have the locks changed back and you'll be charged with unlawful eviction. This is ridiculous, Megan screeched. She owes me money. Ma'am, return to the apartment now. She hung up. Officer Martinez sighed. We'll give her 30 minutes. If she doesn't show, we're calling a locksmith and she'll be responsible for the cost plus potential criminal charges. 25 minutes later, Megan arrived, her face twisted with rage. She unlocked the door with shaking hands while muttering under her breath about police states and protecting the rich. I entered my apartment to find chaos. My belongings had been rifled through. My laptop was missing from my desk. Several pieces of jewelry were gone from my dresser. Officer, I said, my voice shaking, she's stolen my things. I took what you owe me, Megan shouted. It's payment for. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent, Officer Martinez began. The next hour was a blur. Police took photos of the ransacked apartment. I identified missing items. Megan was arrested for theft and unlawful eviction. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed about inequality and corporate greed. Lisa helped me file an emergency restraining order that night. We also discovered something interesting when we reviewed the lease. Megan had violated multiple clauses including the one about illegal activity on the premises. I had grounds for immediate termination of her tenancy. The next morning, I met with the building manager, Harold, who was horrified by what had happened. I've had difficult tenants before, he said, but changing locks and stealing property? That's a new one. Don't worry, Ms. Jessica, we'll handle this properly. By that evening, Megan's possessions were legally removed from the apartment and placed in storage. The locks were changed again, this time legitimately. I finally had my home back, though I installed a security system that very night. The legal aftermath was swift. Megan was charged with theft, unlawful eviction, and harassment. My laptop and jewelry were recovered from her room. She hadn't even tried to hide them, apparently believing she was entitled to them. During her arraignment, the full extent of her delusion became clear. She told the judge she was starting a revolution against income inequality and that I was a symbol of corporate greed stealing from the working class. The judge was unmoved. Ms. Megan, regardless of your political views, you cannot steal from your roommate or illegally evict them. The defendant's income has no bearing on your criminal actions. She was sentenced to probation and ordered to pay restitution. She also lost her job at the coffee shop. Turns out harassing customers and getting arrested for theft doesn't look good for a barista. I never got the restitution money. Last I heard, Megan had moved back to her parents' house in Kansas, still posting on social media about the injustice of her arrest and how I'd destroyed her life over money. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd destroyed her own life over money that wasn't even hers. I kept the apartment for another 2 months while looking for a new place. Despite the locks being changed and the security system, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. I ended up moving to a 1-bedroom apartment in a building with better security and much stricter tenant screening. My $11,000 bonus? I used it exactly as planned, paid off some credit card debt, put money in savings, and yes, I splurged on a nice vacation. A vacation I desperately needed after the Megan ordeal. The experience taught me valuable lessons about roommates and boundaries. I'd been so focused on finding affordable housing that I'd ignored red flags during the interview process. Megan's comments about rich tech people gentrifying Seattle, her insistence that everything should be equal without defining what that meant, her barely concealed resentment when she learned what I did for a living. Now, when people ask why I pay more to live alone, I tell them about Megan, about how she saw my bonus notification and decided she was entitled to half, about how she changed the locks and stole my belongings, about how she genuinely believed that being roommates meant sharing income, not just expenses. Most people are shocked. She actually thought you should split your paycheck? She thought we should equalize our incomes, I explain. In her mind, me making more money while living in the same apartment was oppression. The truth is, I would have been happy to help Megan if she'd ever asked. If she'd said, "Hey, I'm struggling this month, could I pay you back for utilities later?" I would have said yes. If she'd approached me about adjusting our split based on income from the beginning, we could have had that conversation. But she didn't ask, she demanded. She saw my bonus and decided it was hers. She turned a simple roommate arrangement into class warfare, with me as the enemy. 6 months later, I ran into Tom, my old neighbor, at a farmer's market. "Jessica, how are you? I heard Megan tried to rent the apartment again, but Harold told her to pound sand." "She tried to come back?" "Oh yes, showed up last month claiming she'd been illegally evicted and demanding her apartment back. Harold had the police report ready. She left pretty quickly after that." We laughed, but it was tinged with sadness. Megan had had a good situation, nice apartment, reasonable rent, a roommate who paid on time and kept to herself. She threw it all away because she couldn't stand the idea that I earned more than her. That $11,000 bonus changed my life, but not in the way Megan intended. It taught me the importance of financial privacy. It showed me how quickly envy can turn to entitlement. It reinforced that boundaries aren't just about saying no, they're about protecting yourself from people who think your success is their opportunity. Now I live alone in my one-bedroom apartment. It costs more, but the peace of mind is worth every penny. No one rifles through my mail. No one monitors my banking notifications. No one demands half of my achievements. And if I ever get another bonus, well, that's between me, my bank account, and the vacation I'll be planning. Because that's the thing about bonuses, they're called bonuses for a reason. They're extra, they're earned, and they're certainly not for roommates who think proximity equals profit sharing. If you're watching this and living with roommates, learn from my experience. Be clear about financial boundaries from day one. Document everything. And if someone starts eyeing your success with entitlement instead of encouragement, run. Because sometimes the most expensive roommate is the one who costs you nothing until they decide they deserve everything. Thank you for watching my story. Protect your boundaries, document everything, and remember, your bonus is yours, no matter what your roommate thinks about income inequality.
Hey everyone, I'm Yasmin and I want to share a story that sheds light on my incredibly entitled and eccentric mother-in-law, Jessica. My husband Kai suggested sharing this tale because he enjoys reading them from time to time. Before you find it odd, let me clarify that he's well aware of his mother's eccentricities, having been her first victim. Kai's upbringing involved Jessica, who divorced his father shortly after his birth. He experienced her craziness firsthand and distanced himself as much as possible. Unfortunately, Jessica's poor taste in men persisted, leading to another abandonment by Kai's father. While Kai's father paid child support initially, he later terminated his rights. "I've never met the man and have no desire to." Claiming to have single-handedly raised Kai, Jessica exploited him to extract money from her family for an extended period. When they grew weary of supporting her, she found a job but continued to siphon money from Kai. During his teenage years, Jessica coerced him into working, all the while pocketing his earnings until he turned 18. Recognizing the need to break free, Kai took out student loans and secured a scholarship for college. That's where we crossed paths. Kai shared the harrowing stories of his mother's behavior, and I couldn't help but be furious on his behalf. I questioned how he could still be in contact with her. He explained, "I was raised by a narcissist. She conditioned me to believe that taking care of her is my responsibility." Distressed by Kai's situation, I used my savings to kickstart his therapy. Although initially resistant, Kai eventually embraced the process, gaining confidence and slowly standing up to his manipulative mother. Recognizing the positive changes, I continued supporting him. Unsurprisingly, Jessica never liked me. During our first meeting, she accused me of being a gold digger who poisoned her son against her. I defended myself, highlighting that I used my money to help Kai access therapy. Over the years, Kai and I graduated, got married, and secured good jobs. Despite working hard for our success, Jessica persisted in her financial demands. She eventually got married to a disrespectful man named Frank, and Kay reluctantly agreed to rent her an apartment. When we bought a house, she expressed her satisfaction, stating, "Heave, I'm so happy that you finally bought a house. I was getting tired of living in an apartment. So when can Frank and I move in?" "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" "Well, I'll be moving into your house with Frank, that's what I'm saying. Why should I live in an apartment when you are housing your wife for free?" "Jessica, we both bought this jointly. I literally co-own this place with Kai. I don't live here for free. You are the one who lives in the apartment for free since Kai pays the rent." "Watch your mouth, Jasmine. I don't tolerate disrespect from anyone. I'm talking to my son about his house. I didn't ask you anything. I have the right to talk since it's also my house you are talking about. You're not staying with us, and neither is Frank. That's for my son to decide, and he knows that it's his responsibility to take care of me. I'm already taking care of you, Mom. You don't get to move into my house to raise me. That's not how it works, and there is no chance of an argument, so don't even try. You're acting like an entitled brat, Keith. Your mom worked hard to raise you, and you need to take some responsibility for her. Now, be a good son and give us a copy of your keys so that we can move in." "You don't get to say what I do with my house keys, Frank. Neither of you is even getting a copy of our keys. I'll say this for the last time, you two will not be moving into our house. That's it." You would think that's the end of it. Well, it isn't. For days, Frank and Jessica kept harassing us and guilting us. Jessica even said some horrible things to me because she thought I was manipulating Keith and making him abandon her. It was funny at first, but soon we got fed up. One day, Kay went to their apartment to drive it into their heads that they wouldn't be moving in. We thought our point got across since we stopped hearing from them. Problem solved. Well, not quite. A month after we moved into our house, we had a small vacation coming up. After saving for years, we finally decided to go on a break to celebrate our house purchase. It was supposed to be a relaxing vacation for the two of us by the beach. We both took time off and decided to take things easy for that week. We flew there and had a blast from the first day itself. But as evening came, something shocking happened. I got a notification from the Ring camera on my house's door. Yes, we did set up surveillance cameras before we went on vacation since we didn't ask anyone to house sit. We thought that it would be important. Now, I had no idea who would even show up at the door. The neighborhood is pretty safe, and we have lived there before. Hardly anything ever happened there, so I was curious why there was so much activity at the house. I opened my phone to see what the hell was going on there. What I found in the live camera footage shocked me. There I saw my dear mother-in-law Jessica and her new husband Frank moving into our freaking home. Yes, they somehow got into our house and brought 12 bags of clothes. Literally 12 freaking bags. They were moving into the guest room and setting up everything there. Jessica even went into the kitchen to make herself some food. I was shocked and angry at what I was witnessing. I knew that I needed to tell Keith immediately. So I called him over and said, "Keith, I have some news. I think we need to talk about it right now. Right now." "What's so important, Yasmin? We're on vacation. I'm kind of not in the mood for any serious stuff today." "Trust me, Keith, I'm not in the mood to deal with horrible people either. But this situation is dire and needs our immediate attention. I'm afraid it's about your mother. Mom's making trouble again." "Oh God, what is it this time? Did she manage to break into our house or something?" From the look I gave Keith, it became apparent to him that he wasn't off the mark. His eyes immediately turned into saucers as he tried to make sense of the situation. I pulled out my phone and showed him what Jessica and Frank were doing. He was shocked and looked very angry at what he was seeing. I mean, his joke turned out to be the truth. His mom broke into our new house and was moving in furniture with her husband. Keith looked a little pissed off and said, "You can leave it to my mother to surprise me in the worst way possible. Looks like she didn't take the hint at all. We made it clear that day that she won't be living with us. I'm even surprised as to how she got the keys to our house. It just blows my mind. Her new husband is a sleazy guy, Yasmin. We both know that. I'm afraid he may have gotten his hands on our keys and made a copy. I wouldn't put it past him. We will need to go back and change the locks. That's the only way we can make sure that they don't budge into our house anytime they like. But what do we do about this current problem? Do you have something in mind?" "Look, I know they are your parents and all, but I really want to call the cops on them. What they are doing is illegal and downright scary. They can't be trusted anymore. Either calling the cops and getting no contact with them is the best solution possible." I gave Keith some time to turn the idea in his head. I could see that he was thinking hard and had grim lines on his forehead, but it didn't take too long for him to come back with a response, and his response was way better than I imagined. He said, "You know what, Yasmin? Let's do it." "What? Are you sure about that? There'll be no going back once we do this, and the cops will drag your mom and Frank to the streets with all their things." "I know that, Yasmin. I've given them enough chances to improve themselves. They just betrayed my trust every time. I have to stop somewhere. There has to be some consequences. What they did today is not only a breach of our privacy but also illegal. I think it's time they realize they can't do whatever they want. Would you go no contact with them as well?" Of course, my reluctance to do that has already created a lot of problems. I should have done this a long time ago. I'm freaking stupid and thought mom would grow some sense after I got married. Since that's not happening, I'm going to distance myself from them. It's the only way, and I am actually feeling good about it. Okay then, if you're on board with it, let's proceed with that plan. But first, let's call your mom and give her a warning. Just a final chance to make this right. I don't have any hope, but we can get evidence that we didn't allow her in our house. Keith agreed with the plan and called his mother. She didn't pick up the first time through the security cameras. I could see that she was visibly annoyed and went to Frank. They discussed something before answering the call. When we rang the second time, she put the phone on loudspeaker so that Frank could join in as well. She said, "Hey Keith, how are you doing? Is the vacation going fine? You need to tell me what's going on over there." "I don't know what you're talking about. Everything is just breezy here. Nothing to worry about really." "Jessica, you and Frank breaking into our house is nothing to worry about." Jessica went quiet when I said that. On the security tapes, we could see that she tensed and looked at Frank again. I mean, Frank was better at fooling and manipulating people, so this was expected. Jessica wanted her new husband to come up with some plan. "What are you even talking about, Yasmin? Kay, your wife has gone crazy. You need to shut her up." "Don't talk to my wife like that. We know what you two are up to. With cameras in the house, both inside and out, there's no point in lying to us. We can see you on our phones right now." "Wait, what? How dare you spy on us, Keith? This is unacceptable. What about our privacy? You should have been more thoughtful." It was ironic how Jessica was offended by the fact that we could see their activities on our screen. She talks about respecting people's privacy when she broke into someone's house and made it her own. I didn't know if Jessica was trying to deflect or if she was genuinely offended. I have a good guess that it's a little bit of both. Her words sparked something in me, and I said, "That's rich coming from you, Jessica. You are the one who broke into our private home when we clearly told you that you are not allowed in." "I don't care what you say, Yasmin. It's my son's house too, so I have the right to be here. I'm his mother and should be staying with him." "I already said no to that, Mom. Just because you're my mother doesn't mean you will go wherever I go. You already have an apartment that I pay for. Who wants to live in that tiny apartment when you have brought such a big house?" "You're turning into such a selfish man after getting married, Keith. This is unacceptable. You can't expect your own mother to live in an apartment while you enjoy a whole house with your wife. That decision is not up to you, Mom. You shouldn't have just packed up your stuff and moved into the house. How did you even get the keys?" Both me and Kay were troubled by this question and needed answers immediately. Also, we needed them to confess to their wrongs so that we could use that to report them to the police. And our hunch was right. Frank said, "Well, since you decided to be a brat and ignore your mother, I went and made a copy of your keys." "Who the hell told you to touch my keys? I didn't give you permission to do that." "I don't need your permission, Kai. I'm your stepdad. I have the authority to do what I think is right. You don't get to question me." "I don't care who you are to me, Frank. I'm a grown-ass man and don't need a parent. What you did was forgery, and both are offenses under the law." "Kai, how dare you talk to Frank like that? He only did this because he knew I was sad. A mother should have the keys to her son's house for emergencies and all, you know? For emergencies and breaking in whenever you want? You're insane, Jessica. You need to get off our property with all your stuff within an hour. If you don't, we will call the cops." That made Jessica and Frank look frightened. They visibly panicked and whispered something amongst themselves. Their panic was clear on their faces, and we could see that through the cameras. In the end, they said, "Don't threaten us, woman. This is not your house. This is my son's house. Only he gets to make those decisions. This house belongs to both Yasmin and me, and we both want you to get out before I'm forced to call the cops." "Trust me, Mom, that will be ugly." "What an ungrateful brat you are, Keith. How can you threaten to kick out your mom?" She was given a warning and didn't listen. Now both of you will be facing consequences. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate my house before I call the cops. Remember that I have you on surveillance and I will know what you are doing. Frank and Jessica started to yell at us when we hung up. We didn't want to go into an argument with them anymore. Their entitled brains were not meant to participate in conversations or healthy discussions. They didn't care about anything but themselves. We gave them 1 hour while we put all the proof into a folder. Through the cameras, we could see that they were having a discussion but didn't budge. Instead, Jessica started to unpack her bags. That made us both angry as hell. As the hour passed, we called the police with all the evidence we had. Thankfully, they took us seriously and went to our house. We saw the whole fiasco unfold in front of our house. The cops went there and knocked at the door. Jessica and Frank opened the door and immediately faked being confused. After the officers told them everything, they called us and sang a different tune. They said, "Kay, why was there a need to call the cops? We just want to live with our son. Why are you making things so difficult? Tell the cops that this was all a misunderstanding." "I don't want you living with me, Mom. I said that 100 times now. Stop being so freaking entitled. Leave before the cops arrest you and we are forced to press charges." "Kay, don't do this. Please look, we have nowhere to go. You need to let us stay here. Just tell the cops to leave. We will have a calm discussion about this once you come back." "Absolutely not, Mom. You need to back up and go to your apartment. I want my house empty today and right now, Keith. Actually, we can't go back to the apartment. I canceled the lease and sold my furniture. We really have nowhere to go. I thought that she wouldn't mind living with us, so I canceled the lease myself." The audacity of this woman shocked me to the core. She canceled her lease because she thought she could force us to house her. She was freaking insane. He was boiling with rage and ready to scream at her sorry ass. He said, "You went behind my back and canceled your lease? What the freaking hell, Mom? You know what? That's not my problem. I don't care where you go. You need to vacate my house." No, Keith. Please listen to me. I've nowhere to go. Don't kick us out. I'm your mother. Do you want your mother to be homeless? You made yourself homeless, Mom, since you don't want to stay in a rented apartment anymore. I won't give you rent money anymore. I'm freaking done. You can take your new man and figure out something for yourself. Get out of my house and don't try to contact me again. At this point, Jessica was literally crying and begging to make us hear her out. She even cried to me and brought up my dead mother to guilt me. They had the very opposite reaction than what she expected. Me and Key got so mad that we shouted at them and hung up. We immediately blocked the numbers because they crossed all our boundaries in one day and somehow made things worse than ever. The cops stayed back at the house and made sure that Jessica and Frank left. I called a mutual friend to help house it until we came back. She also assured me that she would call a locksmith to change our door lock the next day. She's a friend from college, and we trust her a lot. We knew that she would make sure our house was safe. She lived in an apartment, so it was easy for her to come to the house. Frank and Jessica left and went to God knows where. My guess is they spent the night at the hotel and bought new phone numbers to harass us. It didn't work. No relative took their side either because they knew Jessica well enough, and they didn't want to be in her drama. Also, they told her in no uncertain terms that they wouldn't house or help her out in any way. That made Jessica focus her attention back on us. For the rest of our vacation, we kept our phones switched off. We opened our phones once daily to check for emergencies, and that's it. We also only called our friend to make sure everything was all right. Yes, Jessica and Frank did show up again and tried to get in. They left after the friend threatened to call the cops again. We're thinking of sending a cease and desist letter before they escalate their behavior. Thankfully, they didn't want to know why. When we got back from vacation, we found out that Frank had decided to leave Jessica. Why, you may ask? Because she couldn't house and feed him for free anymore. Jessica was devastated and begged her son to talk to her. She finally realized that she needed her son for money. He didn't soften at all. He stuck to the no-contact decision that is still in place today. The last we know from family is that Jessica rented a trailer and still works at the retail store with no hope of retirement in sight.
My parents are pushing me to shoulder the blame for my sister, but that's a line I won't cross. Throughout my life, I've meticulously maintained the image of the perfect child, and I refuse to compromise that now. Hey, everyone, how's it going? This platform is quite new to me, but I hope you can grasp the emotions I'm trying to convey and understand the turmoil I'm experiencing. Being a guy in society, there's this unspoken expectation that I shouldn't express emotions or seek support. It's as if I'm supposed to be this stoic figure, always shielding those around me. Initially, I thought this was a universal perspective on how guys should be. But as I grew older, I realized it was more of a medieval mindset ingrained in my family. Let me provide a brief background. My parents never wanted me. To this day, they still don't. I spent my life hearing how they had hoped for a daughter, and my arrival as their firstborn son left them devastated. They even contemplated giving me up for adoption, not wanting the hassle of handling a boy. You might think this is an exaggeration, but I'm living proof that such situations exist. 3 years later, my sister Kate was born. After years of yearning for a daughter, they finally got what they wanted. It was a day filled with celebration, cakes, laughter, everything that was absent at my birth. As we grew older, my parents started favoring her over me. I became her designated protector, as if I were her bodyguard rather than her brother. I tried desperately to gain my parents' approval. Good grades, participation in sports and clubs, internships, I did it all, hoping they would treat me like their son. But it never happened. Throughout my life, I've internalized the belief that I hold no value, and the only person who matters is my sister. Kate, on the other hand, has been spoiled her entire life. Anything she desired, a simple request, and my parents would fulfill it. We weren't exceptionally rich, but the disparity was glaring. While she received everything on a silver platter, I had to beg for even basic necessities for school. It was an injustice, acknowledged by everyone, including my extended family, but no one dared to confront my parents. It's like they fear the same mistreatment if they speak up. To make matters worse, both my parents are the eldest siblings in their respective families, amplifying the power dynamic. Anyway, things recently took a sharp turn for the worse. Let me fill you in on the details. You all know about the hype surrounding the new iPhone, right? It's practically the only topic of conversation these days. So my sister, being the spoiled one she is, had her heart set on it. However, for the first time in history, my parents dropped the bomb that they couldn't get it for her. Kate has been pushing boundaries lately, sneaking out with her boyfriend in the middle of the night, and her academic performance was on the edge of disaster this semester. This was the perfect opportunity for my parents to rein her in and make her prove her responsibility before rewarding her with the latest iPhone. Kate didn't take the news well at all. She cried for almost an hour, pleading with my parents to reconsider. Even though she already had the previous model, she still yearned for the newest one. My parents, being super soft for Kate, took her to her favorite restaurant to cheer her up. They invited me to join them, but the disdain on Kate's face made me decline. She treats me like a disease, avoiding me as much as possible. Even her favorite meal at her beloved restaurant couldn't satisfy her, and she continued to beg for the new iPhone. Then, out of nowhere, she stopped. Not a single word about the phone for an entire week. I found it suspicious and tried to tell my parents, but they got mad, insisting that she had learned her lesson and matured. It infuriated me, but I kept quiet. And here comes the biggest plot twist you'll ever hear. A week later, she waltzed in with the new iPhone in her hand, the seal unbroken. We were baffled because there was no way she saved enough from her job, and none of us gave her money. As it turned out, she stole the money, or technically, items worth a lot of money. For context, my Aunt Sheila and Uncle Peter are super rich. They own multiple cars, their own house, and they're decked out in designer brands for everything. They go on lavish holidays every summer. Despite their wealth, they're surprisingly humble. Their daughter, Amelia, is close to me, and she's the only one who truly understands me, even though she's not going through the same struggles. She's genuinely nice and always there for me. Whenever I needed someone to lean on, Amelia has been the sister I wish I had. She got married around 3 years ago, and despite the almost 7-year age gap, we still get along exceptionally well. Recently, Amelia held her baby shower at her lavish home. Even though she's no longer under her parents' supervision, her husband and she maintain a lifestyle comparable to what Amelia had while growing up. Their baby shower took place about 2 weeks ago. Here's where things took a turn. Katie, my sister, made a significant mistake during the baby shower. She stole Amelia's belongings. Amelia, always trusting to a fault, didn't notice it at the time. I observed Katie repeatedly disappearing and returning looking jittery, with her eyes darting around nervously. Now, knowing that she was in the process of stealing, her behavior makes more sense, but back then, I was confused and didn't confront her since I knew she'd push me away. The truth unfolded a few days ago when Kate came home in a frenzy, crying her eyes out. It was late at night, and her erratic behavior startled everyone. When questioned, Kate confessed to stealing Gucci, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and even a Hermes Birkin bag from Amelia's closet during the baby shower. We were all shocked, unable to comprehend why she'd resort to stealing when our financial situation didn't warrant it. Her reason: she desperately wanted the new iPhone, and since Dad wouldn't get it for her, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Kate explained her elaborate plan. She took one bag at a time, concealing it under her dress, and then walked to the garage, where she stashed them in our car trunk. It took around 10 attempts before she managed to pilfer everything she wanted. Not only did she steal expensive bags, but she also took Amelia's jewelry from high-end brands like Dior and Cartier. My parents were devastated. Kate was in tears, and I sat in the corner of the living room contemplating how she could do such a thing. Initially, I thought about informing Amelia to put Kate in her place, but the fear of being disowned by my family held me back. What truly hurt was realizing that my own family could do this to me. When Kate began panicking about potential discoveries, we attempted to convince and reassure her that no one would find out if she kept quiet. However, her confession came when she noticed a CCTV camera right outside the garage door, the same route she took to reach the car. If Amelia noticed her missing items, the logical step would be to check the cameras. Kate was in a bind, and my heart felt a slight satisfaction because I hoped she would learn a lesson. Unfortunately, my parents dumped the entire chaos on my plate. After about 30 minutes of her crying and our attempts to reassure her, my dad decided he had enough. He told Kate to calm down so he could think, but I knew I was in trouble when his gaze shifted towards me. I could sense that he planned to use me to save Kate and harm me in the process. He stared at me before opening his mouth, confirming my role as the scapegoat. His plan was for me to take the blame for the entire situation if anyone traced the stolen items back to Kate. I found this absurd because my family already didn't value me, and now Dad wanted me to further degrade myself. He expected me to tell everyone that I forced Kate to steal from Amelia for my own gain. I resisted because, first of all, Amelia would never believe it, and secondly, I didn't agree with the plan. This disagreement sparked a massive family fight, as they all expected me to comply with their wishes. However, I was my own person and refused to be seen as a thief just to protect Kate's reputation. I fought back, expressing my unwillingness to agree to their plan. They got aggressive, and Kate even started bullying me in front of our parents. They did nothing about it, and she taunted me, claiming nobody cared about me, and it didn't matter how they perceived me because they already thought poorly of me. My parents remained silent, using me as a shield to protect their own child. Filled with anger, I tried to show them how their actions were affecting me, but they didn't seem to care. At that point, I didn't even feel like their son. I was merely a tool to protect their interests. I screamed that I wouldn't agree and left the room, retreating to my living room. For a day, nobody spoke to me, but then the treatment turned harsh. Reluctantly, I agreed one night, storming off to my room. However, over the next few days, I began to wonder if complying would make them like me more. Their terrible behavior continued, confirming my suspicion that they treated me badly because I didn't agree with what they wanted. Hoping that complying with their wishes might earn me their favor, I agreed. Surprisingly, they started treating me more like a human once I voiced my consent. At this moment, I'm somewhat convinced that it might have been a good decision. I'm optimistic that with time, the family will forget about this incident and things will return to normal. However, there's an underlying fear that they might begin treating me like a criminal. My only prayer is that Amelia doesn't notice anything is amiss. In the first update, it became evident that Amelia figured out the situation. She noticed her belongings were missing, prompting her to delve into the matter. Last week, we received a call from Amelia, and her tone sounded angry and devastated. My mom picked up the phone, putting the call on speaker for everyone to hear. It was apparent why Amelia was calling, and I braced myself for the fallout. Uncertain about the decision I had made, I didn't want to be labeled the bad guy by every family member. Yet, changing my mind at this point would lead to chaos, and I'd be blamed for everything in my entire life. When Amelia called, my mom ensured I understood my role. As soon as my mom picked up, Amelia's demanding yet not loud voice filled the air, a stark departure from the quiet and confident Amelia I knew. She immediately began asking where Kate was and insisted on speaking with her to understand the motive behind her actions. Initially, my mom feigned ignorance about the situation, feigning innocence, which only fueled Amelia's anger. Amelia watched the CCTV footage and discovered that Kate had stolen purses and jewelry. Expressing her deep disappointment and demanding Kate return everything, Amelia's revelation made both Mom and Kate nervous. The situation escalated when Mom pointed the blame at me, asserting that I forced Kate to steal because I needed money, including a PlayStation 5 bundle. This accusation caught Amelia off guard, causing her to go silent. Knowing how close we were, she couldn't believe that I would be involved in such wrongdoing. Despite my attempts to deny it, Mom insisted on painting me as the instigator, and I had to say it out loud. The heartbreak in Amelia's voice was palpable. Confirming that I was the one who betrayed Amelia was an unforgettable moment. Though I couldn't see her, I could only imagine how awful she must have felt. To be told that someone you trusted so deeply had betrayed you must have been shocking. She hung up without texting or calling, and I understood her silence. When I confessed to being the one who did it, she attempted to understand the situation, but I couldn't find the words to explain. In the second update, my entire family treated me poorly after the news spread. Amelia and her family shared the details with everyone, and since then, I've been bombarded with calls from concerned family members questioning my actions. Recently, we celebrated my little cousin's birthday, and my uncle insisted that I stay home, fearing I might steal something from their house. The isolation from the family left me close to tears, a feeling many might dismiss because I'm a guy, but I have feelings too. Feeling excluded from the family due to something I didn't do, Kate came to my room. Instead of showing sympathy, she dismissed it, telling me not to make a big deal out of it because everyone would forget in a while. She left without acknowledging the pain I was going through or the sacrifices I've made for her. While preparing for the birthday party, I sat alone in my room, contemplating the unfairness of life. Amelia texted, asking why I did it, but I had no response. Feeling lost and abandoned, I ignored her message. I hoped my family would finally recognize me as their son and feel some love for me after going through this ordeal. Alone at home, I grappled with the harsh reality that my family no longer wanted me around, fearing I would steal. The hurtful words and messages from my family over the years replayed in my head, reminding me that I wasn't the son they wanted. They made it clear that having Kate was the happiest day of their lives, while I was left alone in my room, contemplating whether I wanted to continue this charade. However, I'm not so sure I have the courage to go against them either. What would you do? Update number 3. Okay, here's a bit of an update on the situation. Do you guys remember how I wasn't sure I wanted to do this at all anymore? Well, I stuck to that and reminded myself that if my family doesn't care about me, I can care about myself. Initially, I was really scared of retaliating because even if I did, it wasn't like anybody was going to believe me or stick to my side. Well, that's what I thought. However, a few days ago, Amelia called me and told me she needed to meet with me. I was skeptical about it. Even though we were like siblings, there was still a rumor about me stealing her belongings for selfish reasons. I didn't know what she wanted me to say or do when we met, but I knew I couldn't say no to her, so I went. We met at this little cafe down the street, which used to be our favorite during middle school. Going there with so much going wrong in our lives felt like we were tainting it somehow, but it also felt like we'd get out of there with something going right. When we got there, I realized that things were going to be okay. Amelia did not look angry as I thought she would be. She actually smiled at me when I entered and told me to sit down. She seemed really calm, so I had a bit of hope that she would listen to what I had to say. After the basic pleasantries, she asked me why I was holding up the entire news of whatever was happening. That's when I broke down. I didn't start to cry because I've had it so engraved in me not to do that. But she could see my face and how much this entire thing was affecting me. I saw genuine concern on her face when I looked at her. The concern on her face when she asked me what actually happened is something I'm going to appreciate for my whole life. It made me feel comfortable enough to tell her what exactly happened, why I did what I did. She understood why I did it because she knows I crave my family's validation, and I've been craving it for years. Obviously, if I was going to get an opportunity to try to fight for it, I'd do it. However, she kept frowning as she looked towards me, constantly shaking her head as she heard about everything I've had to manage this week. After I was done, she looked at me with pure concern and told me I was ruining myself for my family. She explained to me that I should not ruin myself just because my family does not appreciate me for who I am. It's not my fault that I was born a guy, so I should not have to pay for it either. Hearing her tell me how unfairly I was being treated and how she's always known that I wasn't capable of doing something as crappy as what they said I did made me feel like she was the only one who truly understood me, the only one who would always be by my side through everything. After that, she told me I should let everyone know the truth and not let my family, especially Kate, walk all over me like that. However, I wasn't sure about that because I didn't know if I had the courage to go against them and still live in the same house as they do. But she told me that she'd be on my side the entire time, and if I needed extra support, she was going to act as a witness and tell everyone what actually happened and how unfairly everybody in my family treated me. At this point, I don't know how I'm going to manage it, but we've come up with a whole plan. I just hope I can convince everyone that it wasn't me and make everybody see the true face of my family. Update number 4. So, we've come up with a plan. Basically, I have to convince my parents to host a dinner that everybody would be invited to so I could tell them what happened and expose my family. Initially, I didn't know how to do that because how was I going to convince them to host something? But then I realized I could make myself look worse in front of them and use that as an advantage. So I told them I wanted to apologize to everybody in the family, even though they knew it was me. I was going to apologize so that they'd feel more pity. It took me a while to convince them to do it. At first, they did not want to go through all the trouble just because I wanted to apologize. They told me to just send a text message to everybody and get it done with. But then I tried to get emotional with them. I told them how I didn't want to do it over text because the entire essence of the apology would be ruined. After an entire day of trying to convince them, they agreed. Amelia and I prepared everything in the 2 days that we had. She got the CCTV footage from her home that showed Kate stealing, and I took a screenshot of all the vile things that she told me and made me cry. Kate knew I hated doing something like that, so she reminded me not to mess it up every time I met someone from the family. The plan was to play all of this on TV in front of everyone so that they would see what the truth was. Instead of me playing it, though, Amelia was going to do it. My parents might get suspicious if I say I want to show the family something, so to be safe, Amelia will do it. Then came the day of the dinner. Before everybody arrived, my family reminded me not to mess it up, and I had to act convinced and tell them I would never want Kate to be in danger or ruin her reputation or anything like that. They seemed pretty convinced, so I think I did a good job of that. Anyways, when everybody came over, we had dinner and talked about some random stuff. During the whole thing, everybody was giving me the cold shoulder, and Amelia had pretended to do the same so nobody would get suspicious. After everybody was done eating, I offered to apologize to everyone. But before I could start, Amelia told me to keep quiet because she had something more important to show. When she opened the TV, the first thing she did was play the video of Kate stealing everything and putting it into the car's trunk. Nobody actually knew this part because Elia's family just said I stole it. So gasps of shock could be heard throughout everybody sitting in the living room. That's when I stood up and announced what had actually happened. I even showed them the text that Kate had sent and finally exposed my entire family. Even Amelia joined in and told everybody how she was a witness to how unfairly and badly my family treated me. After hearing that, everybody started attacking Kate and my parents and expressing their anger for doing something like that. Amelia announced that she was going to sue Kate and ruin her life. My parents looked at me with anger while this entire thing was happening, but my uncle noticed what was happening. Immediately, he called me forward and told me if my parents ever gave me any more trouble, I could come live at his house. Right now, I'm actually at his house because my parents seem too angry and anxious to ever be nice to me again. I'm just hoping they calm down enough, or else I'll just have to figure out a way to move out. Even then, I'm grateful Amelia took my side and helped me expose my family because I've never felt more relieved than I am right now. I don't know why the family would ever want me to go ahead and take all the blame because that is enabling the sister who was a thief, toxic, rotten, manipulative, you name it, that's what she was. I want to shout out to Amelia, though, because without Amelia, who knows how this story would have ended. I want to know your thoughts on it, guys. If you were in Oka's position, how would you go about handling this? Drop your comments down below in the comments section. My name's Mr. Reddit. I narrate stories every single day. So if you guys want to be a part of these daily drama stories, you're going to want to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys tomorrow. But do remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.
My phone buzzed with another mortgage acquisition notification as I sat in my corner office, reviewing the quarterly portfolio report that would soon cross my brother's desk. As Senior Vice President of Residential Lending at First National, I'd spent 12 years quietly building one of the most successful mortgage departments in the state. But to my family, I was still just Christina, the single woman who worked some job at a bank and clearly wasn't doing well enough to afford the lifestyle they thought I should have. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my brother Kevin and his wife Jennifer flaunted their mansion, luxury cars, and designer everything, they had no idea I could buy and sell their entire neighborhood before lunch. I preferred it that way. Modesty had always been my shield against family drama, though lately, that shield was wearing thin. Jennifer's latest text thread in the family group chat was particularly grating. She'd been coordinating Christmas plans with her usual mix of passive aggression and outright condescension. Should we do a gift limit this year? I know some people might be struggling financially. We don't want anyone to feel embarrassed. Everyone knew she meant me. The unmarried sister-in-law who drove a modest Honda, lived in a small downtown condo, and never talked about money. They'd constructed an entire narrative about my supposed financial struggles based on my deliberate choice to live below my means. Christina probably can't afford much this year, Jennifer had written in a follow-up message. Maybe we should suggest a $25 limit so she doesn't feel left out. I'd watched the thread explode with family members agreeing, offering to help me if I needed it, and generally treating me like a charity case. My mother chimed in with concern about whether I was managing okay on my salary. My sister Angela offered to loan me money for gifts. Even my teenage nieces started a separate chat to discuss whether they should go easy on Aunt Christina this year. The whole thing was so absurd I almost laughed. Almost. I'd been handling these assumptions for years, letting them believe what they wanted while I quietly built wealth they couldn't imagine. My investment portfolio alone could fund their lifestyles for decades. The downtown condo they pitied me for. I owned the entire building. The modest car. I preferred reliability over showmanship, especially when I could afford any vehicle on the lot. But Jennifer's latest stunt had crossed a line. Last weekend, at Kevin's birthday dinner, she'd made a show of understanding my situation in front of the extended family. It's so hard being single in this economy, she'd announced, loud enough for everyone at the restaurant to hear. Christina's doing her best, but you know how expensive everything is when you're only supporting yourself on one income. The implication was clear. Poor Christina, struggling alone while Jennifer and Kevin thrived as a power couple. Never mind that Jennifer hadn't worked since marrying Kevin 5 years ago, or that their success was built on maxed-out credit cards and a mortgage that pushed their debt-to-income ratio to dangerous levels. I knew because I'd seen their file. It wasn't intentional snooping. Kevin had applied for a home equity loan through our bank 6 months ago, and his application had been randomly assigned to my department for review. Standard protocol required me to recuse myself due to the family relationship, but not before I'd seen enough to understand their true financial picture. They were drowning. The house, the cars, Jennifer's shopping habits, it was all funded by debt. Their equity was virtually non-existent. Their savings account barely covered a month of expenses, and they were 3 payments behind on Jennifer's BMW. The home equity application had been their desperate attempt to consolidate debt before it all collapsed. Of course, they'd been denied. Their debt-to-income ratio was already at 47%, well above our guidelines. But Kevin had never mentioned the rejection to the family, allowing them to continue believing in the illusion of his success. Now, as Christmas approached, Jennifer had decided to make my supposed poverty the family's holiday entertainment. The gift exchange at my parents' house was shaping up to be her grand performance, where she'd play the generous sister-in-law, graciously accommodating poor Christina's limited budget. I scrolled through the family chat again, watching them plan around my imagined financial constraints. My father suggested lowering the gift limit even further. My mother wondered if she should slip Christina some extra money for shopping. Angela offered to take me to the outlet mall for deals. They meant well, but their assumptions stung more than I cared to admit. Not because I was ashamed of my financial situation. I was incredibly proud of what I'd built. But because after 12 years of professional success, my own family still saw me as someone who needed their pity. Maybe it was time to change that narrative. I pulled up the mortgage database and typed in their address. The Flemington property had been flagged for potential foreclosure proceedings within 90 days. Their primary lender, Coastal Banking Group, had already begun the preliminary paperwork. In the industry, we called it circling the drain. That point where borrowers were technically still making payments, but everyone could see the inevitable end approaching. Coastal was one of several smaller banks that regularly sold distressed mortgages to larger institutions like ours. It was a standard practice that helped them minimize losses while giving us opportunities to work with borrowers on more favorable terms. Sometimes we could save homes that other banks had given up on. Sometimes we could do other things entirely. I opened a new email to Patricia Morris, our acquisitions director, and began typing. Patricia, I'd like to discuss a potential mortgage purchase in the Flemington development. Priority timeline preferred. Please prepare the standard package for a cash acquisition within 30 days. I attached Kevin and Jennifer's property details and hit send. 30 minutes later, Patricia called. Christina, this is an interesting property. Small outstanding balance relative to the current market value, but the borrowers are clearly in distress. Coastal will probably take 60 cents on the dollar to move it quickly. Are we looking at this for the investment portfolio? Personal acquisition, I said simply. I'll fund it directly, outside of bank business. Patricia paused. In 12 years of working together, I'd never made a personal real estate request. Of course, I'll reach out to Coastal this afternoon. Should be straightforward. One more thing, I added. I'd prefer this to remain confidential until after the holidays. Understood. I'll handle it personally. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of holiday preparations and banking business. True to her word, Patricia moved quickly on the acquisition. Coastal was eager to clear the distressed asset from their books, especially when we offered a cash purchase that would close before their quarterly reporting deadline. By December 20th, I'd owned my brother's house. The paperwork was beautifully straightforward. Kevin and Jennifer's mortgage had been transferred to me personally, making me their new lender. They'd receive notification after the holidays, along with information about their new payment arrangements. Nothing about their loan terms would change immediately. I wasn't interested in disrupting their Christmas with foreclosure threats. I was interested in something much more satisfying. The family gift exchange was scheduled for Christmas Eve at my parents' house. Traditional timing, traditional format. We'd draw names from a hat, exchange presents, and Jennifer would undoubtedly find some way to highlight my supposed financial struggles in front of everyone. Except this year, I'd be ready. I spent considerable time choosing Jennifer's gift. It needed to be perfect, something that would make my point without being unnecessarily cruel. After all, Kevin was still my brother, and despite their financial irresponsibility, I didn't want to destroy their Christmas entirely. I settled on an elegant envelope with the mortgage deed inside, along with a brief letter explaining the situation. Professional, direct, and absolutely devastating. Christmas Eve arrived with the usual chaos of family gatherings. My parents' house was decorated with their typical enthusiasm, lights on every surface, mistletoe hanging from doorways, and the massive tree that had been Dad's pride for 30 years. The whole family was there. Kevin and Jennifer, my sister Angela, and her husband, my 2 teenage nieces, and my parents playing host to the crowd they'd loved having around them for decades. I arrived at 6, carrying a bottle of wine and the carefully prepared envelope that would change everything. Christina. Jennifer swept toward me with exaggerated warmth, air kissing both cheeks like we were at a charity gala. You look wonderful. That coat is so classic. Classic was Jennifer's speak for probably from 3 seasons ago, but I smiled and thanked her anyway. I love what you've done with your hair, she continued, examining my simple ponytail with a fake enthusiasm of someone making conversation with a distant relative. So practical for work. Kevin appeared with drinks, looking slightly uncomfortable. He'd always been better at reading family dynamics than his wife, and something in my expression must have warned him that tonight felt different. Good to see you, sis, he said, handing me a glass of wine. How's work treating you? Very well, I replied. Busy season. You know how it is in banking. Jennifer laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Oh, banking. So steady. So secure. Kevin always says you're so smart to choose stability over those risky careers. I nodded thoughtfully. Stability has its benefits. The evening progressed through dinner, conversation, and the usual family dynamics. Jennifer held court with stories about their recent vacation to Cabo, their plans to remodel the kitchen, and Kevin's potential promotion that would finally allow them to get the boat they'd been wanting. Every story was calculated to emphasize their success, and by contrast, my obvious lack thereof. She mentioned their new country club membership, the private school they were considering for future children, and the investment property they might buy in Florida. All funded by debt they couldn't afford, but the family didn't need to know that. Finally, after dessert, Mom announced it was time for gifts. We gathered in the living room, arranged in the same circle we'd used since childhood. The pile of presents in the center looked impressive, though I knew Jennifer had specifically orchestrated the display to maximize visual impact. Before we start, Jennifer announced, standing up with the authority of someone calling a board meeting, I want to say something. Here it comes, I thought. Family is about more than money, she began, looking directly at me with theatrical compassion. It's about love and support and being there for each other no matter what our circumstances might be. My mother smiled approvingly. Angela nodded along. Even my nieces looked touched by the sentiment. Some of us are more fortunate than others, Jennifer continued, her voice taking on the tone of a charity spokesperson. Some of us have been blessed with financial success, while others are still finding their way. The room was completely silent now, everyone understanding exactly who she meant. So this year, I think we should all remember that the best gifts come from the heart, not from the wallet. Christina, I want you to know that we love you just as much whether your presents cost $5 or $500. We don't judge anyone based on what they can afford. The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. My teenage nieces looked mortified on my behalf. Kevin was studying his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. Even my father shifted uncomfortably in his recliner. Jennifer basked in the attention, clearly pleased with her performance. Now let's exchange gifts with grateful hearts. We drew names from Mom's antique ceramic bowl. I watched Jennifer pull Kevin's name with obvious delight. She'd undoubtedly bought him something expensive that would reinforce their image of prosperity. I drew Angela's name, which was perfect. I'd bought her a beautiful cashmere scarf that cost more than Jennifer probably spent on groceries in a month. The gift exchange began with my nieces, who gave each other handmade jewelry and gift cards with the earnest enthusiasm of teenagers who still believed Christmas magic was real. Angela and her husband exchanged practical gifts. A new briefcase for him, spa vouchers for her. Kevin presented Jennifer with a diamond tennis bracelet that probably cost 3 months of their mortgage payments. She squealed with delight, holding it up for everyone to admire while making sure they all noticed the size of the stones. "Kevin, you spoil me," she announced, loud enough to ensure everyone heard the implied contrast with my expected offering. When it was my turn to give Angela her gift, I handed over the elegantly wrapped scarf box. She opened it with genuine surprise and delight. "Christina, this is gorgeous. The quality is incredible. This must have cost a fortune." Jennifer's smile flickered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "How thoughtful. Christina has such good taste, even when she's being careful with her budget." Finally, it was Jennifer's turn to give me her gift. She presented a small box with a bow, her expression radiating the magnanimous joy of someone performing an act of charity. "I hope you love it," she said sweetly. "I thought about you the moment I saw it." Inside was a cheap bracelet from a discount jewelry store, the kind of thing that would turn my wrist green within a week. The price tag was still attached, $12.99. "It's lovely," I said, and meant it. The bracelet itself wasn't important. What mattered was the message. Jennifer had spent $13 on my gift while talking about not judging people based on what they could afford. "Your turn, Christina," Mom announced, clearly trying to move past the awkward moment. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared. It was cream-colored paper, heady stock, with Jennifer's name written in elegant calligraphy. "Here you go," I said, handing it to her with a smile. "I thought about you the moment I arranged it." Jennifer took the envelope with curiosity, probably expecting a gift card or maybe a heartfelt letter about sisterly love. The whole family watched as she carefully opened the flap. Her expression changed the moment she saw the first document. The color drained from her face as she pulled out the mortgage deed, her hands beginning to tremble as she read her own address at the top of the page. What is this?" she whispered. I maintained my smile, keeping my voice gentle and conversational. It's exactly what you said. I couldn't afford much this year. $13 million was really stretching my budget, but I managed. The room went dead silent. Angela's mouth fell open. Kevin looked like he'd been hit by lightning. My parents stared in confusion, clearly not understanding what they were seeing. Jennifer's voice cracked as she read further down the document. This says you own our house. That's right, I confirmed pleasantly. Coastal Banking was looking to sell your mortgage, and I thought it would make a meaningful Christmas gift. You're absolutely correct that the best gifts come from the heart. Kevin finally found his voice. Christina, what are you talking about? We have a mortgage with Coastal Banking. Had, I corrected gently. Past tense. As of December 20th, your mortgage was transferred to me personally. You'll receive the official notification in a few days, along with information about your new payment arrangements. Jennifer was staring at the deed like it was written in a foreign language. But how did you? You work at a bank. You can't afford. I'm Senior Vice President of Residential Lending at First National, I said, my voice still calm and pleasant. I've been there for 12 years. My department handles about 40% of the state's mortgage acquisitions. The silence in the room was deafening. Mom was clutching Dad's arm. Angela looked like she was watching a movie and couldn't follow the plot. Jennifer's face had gone from pale to red as the implications sank in. You bought our house? Our actual house? Well, technically, I bought your mortgage from the bank. You still own the house. You just make your payments to me now, instead of Coastal. Nothing changes in terms of your monthly obligations. Kevin was reading over Jennifer's shoulder, his expression growing more horrified by the second. Christina, this is... Why would you do this? I looked around the room at my family, all of them staring at me like I'd suddenly grown a second head. Because I was tired of being treated like a charity case. I said simply, for years, you've all assumed I was struggling financially because I don't flaunt my success. Jennifer just spent 5 minutes lecturing everyone about not judging people based on money, right after spending the last month in family group chats discussing how poor I am and how we should all accommodate my limited budget. Jennifer's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The truth is, I continued, I've been financially stable for years. I could have corrected your assumptions at any time, but I preferred privacy over performance. Unfortunately, that privacy seems to have been interpreted as poverty. Angela found her voice first. Christina, how much money do you make? Enough, I replied. My salary last year was in the mid-6 figures, plus bonuses and investment income. The downtown condo you all pity me for. I own the entire building. It generates about $30,000 a month in rental income. Dad was shaking his head slowly. But you drive that old Honda. Because it's reliable, fuel efficient, and I don't need to prove anything to anyone with my choice of vehicle. I could buy any car on the lot tomorrow, but I prefer function over flash. Jennifer was still staring at the mortgage deed, her voice barely a whisper. You have $13 million? That's just what I spent on your mortgage. It represents about 8% of my liquid assets. The number hit the room like a physical force. Mom actually gasped. Kevin sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Jennifer looked up at me with something between fury and panic. But if you own our mortgage, that means you make your payments to me now, I confirmed. Same amount, same terms, same schedule. The only thing that changes is where you send the check each month. Kevin was running his hands through his hair, clearly trying to process the situation. Jesus, Christina. We had no idea. I know you didn't. That was intentional on my part. I prefer keeping my financial situation private rather than turning family gatherings into discussions about money. Jennifer's voice was getting shrill. But you let us think you were poor. You let us plan the whole gift exchange around your supposed budget problems. I let you assume what you wanted to assume, I corrected. I never asked for anyone to lower gift limits or accommodate my imagined financial struggles. Those were conclusions you drew based on your own perceptions. Angela was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Why didn't you ever tell us? Because I didn't want our relationships to change based on money. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have. Unfortunately, the absence of obvious wealth seems to have been interpreted as a character flaw rather than a personal choice. Jennifer was reading through the papers again, clearly looking for some kind of escape clause. This can't be legal. You can't just buy someone's house without telling them. It's completely legal, I assured her. Mortgage transfers happen thousands of times a day in this country. Banks sell mortgages to other financial institutions routinely. The only unusual aspect of this transaction is that the buyer is a family member. Kevin looked up at me with something that might have been respect. The home equity loan we applied for. You saw our application, didn't you? I nodded. It was randomly assigned to my department. I recused myself immediately due to the family relationship, but not before I saw enough to understand your financial situation. Jennifer's face went ashen. What financial situation? Kevin sighed heavily. We were denied for the equity loan, Jen. Our debt-to-income ratio is too high. But you said, I said we were exploring options. I never said we were approved. The family was watching this exchange like spectators at a tennis match, clearly trying to understand the dynamics they'd been oblivious to. Jennifer turned back to me, her voice desperate now. So what happens next? Are you going to foreclose on us? Raise our payments? Kick us out? Nothing happens, I said calmly. You continue making your payments exactly as you have been. The money goes to me instead of Coastal Banking, but your obligations don't change. But why would you do this if you're not going to change anything? I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt all evening. Because I wanted to give you something meaningful for Christmas. You've spent months worried about my supposed poverty, so I thought I'd share a little financial security with you. Jennifer stared at me blankly. Think about it, I continued. Coastal Banking was preparing foreclosure proceedings. Your mortgage was in distress, and they wanted it off their books. If I hadn't purchased it, you would have been facing much more serious problems in the new year. Kevin's head snapped up. Foreclosure proceedings? Preliminary stages? I confirmed. You're technically current on payments, but your overall financial profile made them nervous. Buying your mortgage removed that pressure. The room fell silent again as everyone processed this information. Jennifer was the first to speak, her voice small and confused. So you saved our house? I secured your housing situation, I said diplomatically. Considered a gift to the family. Angela spoke up tentatively. Christina, I think I speak for everyone when I say we owe you an apology. I shook my head. You don't owe me anything, but maybe next time, don't assume someone's financial situation based on their lifestyle choices. Mom was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Honey, we're so sorry. We had no idea. I know you didn't, Mom. And I'm not angry about the assumptions. I'm just tired of being treated like I need charity when I've been doing fine on my own. Dad cleared his throat, clearly struggling with the revelation. Christina, this is incredible. We're proud of you, sweetheart. We just wish we'd known. Now you do, I said simply. Jennifer was still holding the mortgage deed, staring at it like it might disappear if she looked away. I don't understand how you did this so quickly. Bank acquisitions can move very fast when all parties are motivated, I explained. Coastal wanted to clear the asset, I had the capital available, and everyone benefited from a quick closing. Kevin looked at me with newfound respect. You really could have let us lose the house. Yes, but you're my brother. Despite our differences, I don't want to see your family homeless. Jennifer's voice was barely audible. All those things I said about you not being able to afford gifts were based on assumptions, I finished gently. Next time, maybe ask instead of assuming. The evening wound down after that, with family members approaching me individually to apologize for their misconceptions and ask questions about my career that they'd never bothered to ask before. My nieces were fascinated by the idea that their struggling aunt was actually wealthy, while my parents seemed torn between pride and embarrassment. As people prepared to leave, Jennifer approached me privately. Christina, I owe you a huge apology. I was horrible tonight, and apparently I've been horrible for months without realizing it. I studied her face, looking for sincerity beneath the shock. Thank you for saying that. I never imagined you were doing so well. You're so quiet about everything. I prefer privacy, I said, but maybe I was too private if it led to these kinds of misunderstandings. Jennifer nodded, still clutching the mortgage papers. What do we do now? How do we make payments to you? I'll have my office send you the updated payment information after the holidays. Nothing changes except the address where you send the check. She hesitated, then asked quietly, Are you going to tell everyone what you saw in our financial records? I shook my head. Your business is your business, Jennifer. I'm not interested in embarrassing you further. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. As the family dispersed into the cold December night, I found myself feeling lighter than I had in months. The weight of their assumptions was finally gone, replaced by something that felt like genuine respect for the first time in years. Kevin caught up with me in the driveway as I was getting into my car. Christina, wait. I rolled down the window. What's up? Thank you, he said simply, for saving our house and for not humiliating us in front of everyone about our financial problems. You're welcome. He paused, then added, I think Jennifer learned something important tonight about making assumptions. I smiled. We all did. 3 months later, Jennifer and Kevin's payments arrived promptly on the 1st of each month, always accompanied by a brief note thanking me for the opportunity to maintain their home. Jennifer had stopped making comments about anyone's financial situation at family gatherings, and had even started asking genuine questions about my work and investments. The mortgage acquisition had cost me exactly what I'd told them, $13 million. But the return on investment was immeasurable. For the first time in years, my family saw me as I actually was. A successful professional who had chosen discretion over display, privacy over performance. And every month, when their payment arrived, I was reminded that sometimes the best gifts really do come from the heart, especially when they're wrapped in mortgage deeds and delivered with perfect timing.
I am Nancy, and I have an older brother named Keith, who is 7 years my senior. Since childhood, Keith displayed exceptional academic prowess, excelling from an early age. He graduated from a prestigious high school and university, and naturally, our parents were immensely proud of him. They often spoke about Keith's remarkable achievements. Growing up in an environment where he was expected to excel and constantly praised, Keith's personality underwent some changes. Upon graduating from university and finding a job, he decided to leave our family home, sarcastically remarking, "I can't bear such a mundane life in this house anymore." I'll never forget the wry smile on his face at that moment. Our parents, visibly surprised and somewhat saddened, recalled how cheerful and cherished Keith used to be. Admittedly, I felt anger during that time. I didn't stand out academically or in sports, and my high school wasn't super prestigious. Still, I valued the bond and love within our family. Both Keith and I owed our lives to our parents' support, and I wished he felt the same. Throughout my high school years, I realized the warmth and love of a family are precious. Strangely, my brothers seemed immune to that love. Our parents showered us with endless affection, yet Keith perceived them as ordinary people. As a child, he was my hero, handling everything perfectly. He used to care, play, and help me study. However, by the time I was about to graduate high school, he started questioning the value of higher education and dismissed my pursuits. Whenever confronted, he blamed our parents, claiming he became this way because of them. I cried, but my parents reassured me, saying, "Nancy, you've grown into a truly kind-hearted person." Encouraged by their kindness, I entered a national university and secured a job at my dream company. By the time I started working, my parents were almost 60, and my brother was already married. Oddly enough, neither my parents nor I had met his wife. Despite numerous invitations, he hesitated, citing considerations about introducing her to our family. About half a year into my new life as a working professional, an unexpected event disrupted my routine. During work hours, I received a personal call from my usually aware mother. Concerned, she inquired about my well-being and then dropped the bombshell. "Your father suddenly fell." My heart sank, and I immediately informed my supervisor, rushed to catch a taxi, and hurried to the hospital my mother had mentioned along the way. As I made my way to the hospital, my mind was filled with repeated hopes and prayers for my father's well-being. Upon entering the waiting room, a heart-wrenching scene unfolded. My mother, tears streaming down her face, greeted me with visible distress. "What happened, Mom?" I asked, settling beside her with a heavy heart. The morning had started like any other, and the sudden turn of events left me unable to process the unfolding situation. Words poured out of me, one after another, seeking answers. After a pause, my mother quietly uttered, "Your father has been diagnosed with cancer." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, causing time to momentarily stand still. The shock, surprise, and anxiety within me spilled out in my voice as I questioned, "Why?" Taking a deep breath, my mother began to speak with a tone laced with sadness. "It's stage 4. The cancer has spread to the bile duct, and they said it's hard to remove it all." Her tears flowed uncontrollably, and I struggled to find words as I listened, grappling with the weight of the news. Seeking a glimmer of hope, I asked, "What treatment will be done next?" My mother nodded somberly, and after a brief pause, the attending physician entered to explain the detailed condition and treatment plan. The reality of my father's illness had surpassed expectations, with confirmed metastasis to other parts. Even if they operated, there was a significant risk, and success couldn't be guaranteed. In the heavy silence of the waiting room, my mother and I held hands, attempting to come to terms with this harsh reality. The doctor's matter-of-fact words emphasized the crucial choices ahead, continuing with chemotherapy or opting for support in a palliative care ward. The ticking of the clock's second hand seemed to carve through the atmosphere, underscoring the gravity of the situation. Contemplating how to navigate this challenging moment, I suggested involving my brother Keith in the decision-making process. Picking up my smartphone with a forced smile, I informed my mother that I had already attempted to contact Keith. However, recalling his past behavior and nature, I sensed a premonition: his reluctance to face tough decisions. Despite his potential resistance, I persevered, believing in the importance of gathering the family's opinions. After numerous attempts, I finally heard my brother's slightly irritated voice, urgently and anxiously. I pressed him to understand our father's condition, emphasizing the need for his presence at the hospital. His dismissive response lacked empathy, shaking me to the core, as I reminded him of our father's immense contributions to our family. Tears threatened to spill as I confronted my brother's apparent indifference to our father's critical condition. However, my brother, devoid of any visible emotion, briskly stated, "Now is not the time to be fussing over this. There's no point in discussing further. I'm hanging up," and promptly ended the call. Stunned by the exchange, I found myself at a loss. My astonishment at my brother's indifference was evident. I had known he lacked a sense of family bond and gratitude, but I never imagined he had grown into such a detached person. Returning to my mother, a look of concern was etched on her face. "What happened?" she inquired. I replied, "It seems he is quite busy now," avoiding the details. My mother sighed deeply, murmuring, "It would have been comforting if Keith was here." In the following months, my father chose to spend his final moments in a palliative care ward, and after that decision, he quietly passed away. I informed my brother of this somber news over the phone, conveying the details of the wake and funeral. However, his response was cold, stating, "I'm busy with work, so I can't attend. Please proceed without me." True to his word, he didn't appear at our father's wake or funeral. Even my mother seemed shocked by this fact. She probably never imagined her son wouldn't show up for his father's funeral. Both family and acquaintances expressed their surprise and disappointment at his absence. After the funeral, when a moment of quiet settled among the family, my mother exhaled deeply, muttering to herself, "He really didn't come." I took her hand and said firmly, "Mom, let's not worry about him anymore. We have to let him walk his path. For now, let's cherish our memories of Dad." In response, my mother tightly squeezed my hand and smiled, saying, "Thank you." Unbelievably, the next day, my older brother suddenly appeared at the apartment where we live. When I opened the door, his expression was different from usual, filled with an urgent restlessness. Stepping inside, he demanded, without any greeting, "Where is the inheritance father left behind?" Shocked by his demand, I emotionally retorted, "Seriously? Someone who didn't even show up at the funeral. And now you're saying this?" Visibly irritated, my brother snapped, "Kids should stay quiet," instantly tensing the atmosphere. My mother stepped forward to calm the situation, explaining, "Apart from this apartment, your father didn't leave much behind." "There's no way that's true." Retorting in frustration, my brother barely concealed his anger. Remaining calm, my mother placed my father's passbook on the table for him to see. Flipping through it, it became clear that all the savings our father had were transferred to a different account. "What is this all about?" my brother exclaimed in surprise. Gently, my mother replied, "Your father had instructed to move all the money to my account earlier. Also, this apartment's name has been changed, and now it's in my name." Taken aback, my brother was at a loss for words. He merely clicked his tongue in frustration and left. As we watched his departing figure, we were once again filled with admiration and gratitude for our father's foresight and his plan to protect the family. A few months later, my mother suddenly fell, and she was immediately taken to the hospital. It was completely unexpected, and the family was filled with shock and concern. The diagnosis revealed that she had pneumonia, and it was in a more advanced stage than we thought. I recalled that she had been coughing slightly lately, and when she visited a small clinic, the diagnosis was a minor cold. Relieved by this news, we didn't think much of it. However, more detailed examinations at a major hospital revealed a much more severe condition, giving her only about 3 months to live. Hearing this news left me speechless, as it seemed unimaginable, especially considering how healthy she appeared. Tragically, just a few days after the 3-month mark, my mother quietly passed away, leaving a space filled with an indescribable stillness and sorrow. Filled with guilt and grief, I questioned why I didn't notice sooner and why I didn't take her to a bigger hospital immediately. Even after learning about my mother's pain, there was no sign of my brother coming to our house. My aunt, my mother's sister, and I handled the arrangements for the wake and the funeral. Understandably, my brother's absence was a significant shock for my aunt, just as it had been during our father's funeral. However, expecting or saying anything to my brother felt meaningless, given his past actions. A few days after the funeral, as my aunt and I were sorting out the heirlooms, my brother appeared again, accompanied by his wife, whom we were meeting for the first time. He bluntly inquired about our mother's inheritance, assuming she must have left something. Shocked and dumbfounded, my aunt stared at him in disbelief. The most astonishing part was that beside my brother stood his wife, my new sister-in-law, who neither met our eyes nor greeted us. She just stood silently next to my brother. Even more shocking was that my brother didn't even visit our mother's grave. Trying to maintain calmness, I suggested, "Brother, please at least pay your respects to our parents. Visit Mom's grave." However, he responded dismissively, "Does that even mean anything?" He quickly followed up with, "By the way, how much of Mom's inheritance is left?" At that moment, May's expression changed drastically. In a voice filled with anger, contrasting with her usual warmth, she sternly admonished Keith, "How can you think of such things at a time like this? Nancy is managing the funeral on behalf of both of you, putting in all her effort. Shouldn't you act with a bit of gratitude, thinking of your parents?" However, my brother completely ignored our aunt's anger, responding dismissively, "Auntie, it's none of your business. Don't interfere." With demands made by both my brother and sister-in-law, the atmosphere in the room became cold and tense. Behind my brother, his smiling sister-in-law remarked, "Of course, I remember your name, Nancy. Do you plan to keep all of your mother's inheritance for yourself? Sorry, but we can't allow that. This apartment is so lovely. I think it's perfect for us." I never imagined that my brother and his wife would make such audacious demands. "Why should I have to leave for the sake of both of you?" I asked, my voice quivering. Undeterred, my sister-in-law continued, twirling her finger. "This apartment has just been renovated, and its location is amazing. It's close to the station, and there are plenty of shops, so we'll be living here." My anger reached its peak, and I couldn't hold back. "Big brother, all you care about is the inheritance. What are you thinking?" Turning away, my brother let out a heavy sigh, remarking, "Such vulgar behavior. Do you think raising your voice solves everything? We'll be back here in 3 days. Have everything ready to move out by then." Their intentions became crystal clear with those words. A mix of my anger and sadness bubbled up, and I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. However, this wasn't just a one-time event. Determined, I wiped my tears. My aunt gently tapped my shoulder and handed me a letter. The delicate handwriting of my mother adorned the envelope's surface. "What's this, Auntie?" I asked, carefully opening the envelope. "Your mother entrusted this to me for a just-in-case scenario. She told me to give it to you at the right moment," my aunt said, tears forming in her eyes. Unfolding the paper inside, my mother's beautiful handwriting filled the page. "To my precious Nancy, if you are reading this letter, it means I'm no longer in this world. I'm truly sorry for our parting." Warmth filled my eyes, tears beginning to flow. "You might have Keith visit the house concerning the inheritance, but don't worry, everything that your father handed down to me is now yours." I was at a loss for words. I had no idea my mother had thought this far ahead and prepared everything in advance. "I'm sorry for suddenly leaving you alone, but I'm at peace because I've seen how much you've grown into a wonderful person. While learning is essential, it's not everything. The kindness and compassion you learn through your interactions with people are what I believe hold the most value. Your father and I were genuinely happy to see you grow up with such a warm heart until our last days. Words can't express just how proud we are of you. I truly want to express my heartfelt gratitude. Thank you." Overwhelmed, I read on, deeply moved. "Mom." The words before me blurred with my tears, but I was determined to take in every sentiment my mother had conveyed and continued reading. "Actually, after your father passed away, following his wishes, I secretly changed the apartment's ownership to your name. I'm sorry for using your seal without permission, but it was both your father's and my wish. please don't be angry. Life has its ups and downs. Even when things get tough, we want you to persevere and live your life fully. So stay strong and find your happiness." The letter ended there, tears streaming down my face, wetting the paper. My aunt, standing next to me, pressed her eyes and shed tears alongside me. "Your sister truly cared about you. In her heart, you were a treasure," my aunt said, gently holding my hand. From the envelope, a bank book in my name emerged. It seemed like something my mother must have secretly made in the past. To my surprise, when I opened the bank book, a substantial amount was recorded. I felt that this was probably the inheritance from my father that my mother had saved for me. A few days later, my brother and his wife showed up at the house without even knocking on the door. They entered as if it was their own home. "It's time for you to leave, just as promised, right?" my brother sarcastically said. As I stood still, my sister-in-law became irritated. "Isn't it your duty to leave quickly?" she said, almost as a command. For a moment, I felt overwhelmed by the atmosphere, but I took a deep breath, looked them straight in the eyes, and said calmly, "Actually, this house is now under my name." With that statement, the room's atmosphere became tense. My brother and his wife looked at each other, exclaiming, "What? What kind of joke is this? I am the eldest son. I should inherit the house, right?" Clearly shaken, my brother said. Beside him, my sister-in-law stared at me, saying, "This is the first I've heard of this." However, I had decided to state the facts. The house and the inheritance are all managed under my name, so there's nothing to divide. My brother frowned. "Then hand over half of that inheritance to us." But I questioned his face turning red. This money was left for my future and to ensure that I take care of the house. "You always looked down on me, and now you're asking for money? What changed?" Surprisingly, my sister-in-law exclaimed, "Wait, what is this? This isn't what we were expecting." From what I gathered, my brother recently faced significant trouble at his job and was subsequently fired. Not only that, but he and his wife were moving from one day job to another, seemingly in a tight spot financially. They probably had high hopes for my mother's inheritance and the house. But with my revelation, their expectations were shattered, and they began bickering, placing blame on one another. Watching their childish dispute, I thought, what can possibly be gained from all this? To them, I said calmly, "This is my house now. If you make any unnecessary fuss, I'll call the police." Trembling with anger, they reluctantly accepted my words and left. Since then, I've had no contact with them. I deliberately deleted all their contact details and began a new life in this apartment. This apartment is my treasure, filled with memories of my father and mother. Now I have a loving partner by my side. We plan to build a new family in this apartment. He respects my decision and proposed that we take the first step of our new life here. Our future is bright, and I want to pass on the warm love my parents gave me to the children we will have in the future.
Patricia, table 6 needs their check, and the kitchen's running behind on the salmon orders. I looked up from the restaurant management software where I'd been tracking tonight's revenue numbers, nodding at my assistant manager while keeping one eye on the dining room floor. Saturday nights at Meridian required constant attention. We were booked solid with a 2-hour wait list, and everything had to run like clockwork to maintain our reputation as the city's premier fine dining establishment. I'm Patricia Caldwell, 41 years old, and I spent the last 15 years building this restaurant from a failing neighborhood bistro into a $3.2 million annual revenue operation. Most people don't realize the complexity of managing a high-end restaurant: inventory control, staff scheduling, vendor negotiations, health department compliance, profit margin analysis. It's essentially running multiple businesses simultaneously, all while ensuring every guest has a flawless experience. Tonight was particularly important because we were hosting a private event in the back dining room. Mom's 65th birthday party, organized by my stepfather Richard. He'd insisted on having it here, probably to show off to his children that he could afford to rent out the private dining area of an upscale restaurant. What he didn't know was that I'd comped the entire evening as a gift to Mom, though I'd let Richard believe he was paying the full $2,800 bill. "Patricia, your family's asking for you," my Samlia mentioned as he passed by with a bottle of the 2018 Burgundy Richard had specifically requested, a $180 bottle that he'd ordered 3 of to impress his guests. I glanced at my watch. 7:30. I'd been managing the front of house since 5, ensuring everything was perfect before joining the family celebration. The restaurant was running smoothly now, and my evening manager could handle things for the next few hours. I walked through the main dining room, checking tables automatically. Every server was where they should be, glasses were full, plates were cleared promptly. After 15 years, I could assess the entire operation with a single sweep of my eyes. This restaurant was my life's work, my proof that someone from a working-class background could build something substantial through sheer determination and attention to detail. The private dining room was filled with laughter and conversation. Mom sat at the head of the long mahogany table, wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her for Christmas last year. She looked radiant in her navy blue dress, surrounded by flowers and flickering candles. For a moment, I felt genuinely happy seeing her so celebrated. Richard dominated the other end of the table, holding court with his usual collection of business associates and family members. At 58, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd inherited his father's construction company and spent 30 years coasting on established relationships. He wasn't stupid, just profoundly incurious about anything outside his narrow sphere of golf, bourbon, and complaining about taxes. His children from his first marriage, Marcus and Cheryl, flanked him like royal courtiers. Marcus was 35, recently divorced, and working in middle management at Richard's company despite showing no particular aptitude for construction. Cheryl was 32, married to a pharmaceutical sales rep, and spent most of her time managing her children's elaborate extracurricular schedules while posting about it extensively on social media. "Patricia," Richard called out as I approached the table. "There's our successful restaurateur. Come sit down. We were just talking about family legacy." I took the empty chair beside Mom, accepting the glass of wine that Marcus poured for me. The conversation continued around me as I settled in, catching fragments about property values and investment strategies, topics that Richard considered himself an expert on despite his consistently mediocre financial results. "The point is," Richard was saying to his business partner Dave, "you have to think about these things in terms of blood, real family. That's what matters when you're talking about legacy and inheritance." Mom's smile faltered slightly, though she tried to hide it by taking a sip of wine. I knew that particular expression, the one she wore when Richard said something that bothered her, but she didn't want to cause a scene. "Blood is thicker than water," Cheryl agreed, raising her glass. "Family takes care of family." "Exactly," Marcus chimed in. "That's why Dad's been so smart about structuring his estate planning, making sure everything stays in the bloodline." I continued eating my salmon, observing the conversation without participating. This wasn't unusual. Richard's family had a way of talking around me, rather than to me, as if I were a dinner guest rather than Mom's daughter. After 8 years of marriage to Mom, Richard had never quite figured out how to relate to me, and his children had simply followed his lead. "Speaking of estate planning," Richard said, standing up with his wine glass, "I think this is the perfect time to make an announcement." The table quieted, all attention focused on him. Mom looked up with interest, probably expecting him to announce a vacation or perhaps a renewal of their vows. Richard loved grand gestures, especially when he had an audience. As most of you know, Linda and I have been working with our attorney to update our wills and estate documents. It's important to have these things properly organized, especially at our age. He paused for effect, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. We've made some important decisions about inheritance and family legacy. From now on, only real family, blood family, will have inheritance rights to our estate. The room erupted in applause. Marcus raised his glass enthusiastically, Cheryl clapped her hands together, and Dave nodded approvingly. Richard's business associates murmured approval about the wisdom of keeping wealth in the bloodline. Mom sat perfectly still, her wine glass halfway to her lips, her face carefully neutral. She hadn't known about this announcement. I could tell by the way her shoulders tensed and her breathing became shallow. "That's fantastic news, Dad," Marcus said loudly. "It's exactly the right thing to do. Family loyalty should be rewarded." "Absolutely," Cheryl added. "This way everyone knows where they stand. No confusion, no hurt feelings later on." I set down my fork carefully, watching Mom's reaction. She was staring at her plate, processing what Richard had just announced to a room full of people without consulting her first. This wasn't estate planning. This was a public declaration designed to put me in my place. "Richard," Mom said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately later." "Nothing to discuss, honey. We agreed on this weeks ago. Remember? When we met with the attorney." From Mom's expression, I could tell that whatever conversation he was referencing hadn't gone the way he was now describing it. "Of course," she said faintly. "I just thought." "The beauty of this arrangement," Richard continued, addressing the table like he was giving a board presentation, "is that it clarifies everything. My children inherit from me. Linda's biological family inherits from her. Clean lines, no complications." "What about Patricia?" asked Dave's wife, apparently not reading the room. "What about her?" Richard replied with a dismissive shrug. "She's done very well for herself with this restaurant. She doesn't need our help." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not the disinheritance itself. I'd never expected or wanted Richard's money. It was the public nature of the announcement, the way he turned Mom's birthday celebration into an opportunity to formally exclude me from the family. "I need to check on something in the kitchen," I said, standing up smoothly. "Please excuse me for a moment." No one protested my departure. They were too busy congratulating Richard on his wisdom and discussing the various benefits of bloodline-based inheritance. I walked through the main dining room, past the busy servers and satisfied customers, into the kitchen where my head chef was plating the evening's final orders. The familiar chaos of a working kitchen, calling out orders, sizzling pans, precise movements, usually calmed me. Tonight, it felt like background noise to the conversation I needed to have. I stepped into my office, a small space behind the kitchen that I'd furnished with a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets containing 8 years of business records. I kept my personal documents here too, including the manila folder marked Mom, insurance, that I pulled from the bottom drawer. Inside were 8 years of premium payment receipts for Mom's $750,000 life insurance policy. I'd taken over the payments when she and Richard got married. Not because she couldn't afford them, but because her income was irregular, and I wanted to ensure the policy never lapsed. Mom worked part-time as a substitute teacher, and her paychecks varied significantly from month to month. The insurance premiums were $3,200 annually, Not a huge amount for me, but significant enough for someone on a fixed income. The policy had been originally purchased when I was in college, with me as the sole beneficiary. Mom had wanted to ensure I'd be financially protected if something happened to her. When she married Richard, she'd mentioned updating the beneficiaries, but had never followed through with the paperwork. I'd been sending the premium payments directly to the insurance company for so long that she'd probably forgotten I was still listed as the only beneficiary. I picked up my office phone and dialed the insurance company's customer service line. It was Saturday evening, but their phone system operated 24 hours for policyholders. Thank you for calling Lifetime Financial Services. This is Jennifer speaking. How can I help you today? Hi, Jennifer. This is Patricia Caldwell. I need to verify some information about policy number LFF 4,471,892. I'd be happy to help with that. Can you please provide the last 4 digits of the policyholder's Social Security number? I recited Mom's Social Security digits, along with my own information as the designated contact and premium payer. Thank you. I see you're listed as both the beneficiary and the authorized contact for premium payments. What information did you need to verify? I wanted to confirm the current beneficiary designation and premium payment status. Certainly. The current beneficiary is Patricia Caldwell. That's you. Listed as sole beneficiary for the full death benefit of $750,000. The policy is current and in good standing, with premiums paid through December of this year. And if the policyholder wanted to change the beneficiary, what would that process require? The policyholder would need to complete a beneficiary change form, had it notarized, and submit it to us with appropriate identification. The change would take effect upon receipt and processing. How long does processing typically take? For a standard beneficiary change, usually 3 to 5 business days once we receive the completed documentation. Thank you. That's very helpful. I hung up and sat back in my chair, looking at the premium payment receipts spread across my desk. 8 years of $3,200 annual payments, $25,600 total. Money I'd spent gladly because I loved Mom and wanted her to have security. Money that had maintained a $750,000 life insurance policy that Richard apparently had no idea existed. The irony was perfect. Richard had just publicly declared that only blood family deserved inheritance rights, unaware that Mom's most significant financial asset would pass directly to me, regardless of what his attorney had written into their wills. I returned to the dining room as dessert was being served, the restaurant's signature chocolate soufflé with raspberry coulis. The conversation had moved on to vacation plans and golf handicaps, but the damage from Richard's announcement still hung in the air. Mom was picking at her dessert, contributing little to the conversation. Everything running smoothly out there? Richard asked when I sat down. Always does, I replied evenly. Must be nice having your own business, Marcus said. Complete control over everything. It has its advantages. Though I imagine it's a lot of stress, Cheryl added. All that responsibility. Sometimes I think it would be easier to just work for someone else and not worry about all the business details. Different people are built for different things, I said diplomatically. The party continued for another hour, with Richard holding court and his children laughing at his stories. Mom gradually became more animated, either accepting the evening's earlier announcement or deciding to deal with it later. When people began making departure excuses, I helped coordinate the logistics, getting coats, arranging cars, ensuring the elderly guests had rides home. Patricia, thank you for hosting us here. Richard said as he waited for the valet to bring his BMW around. The food was exceptional, as always. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Your mother is lucky to have such a successful daughter, he continued, in what I assumed was his version of a peace offering, even if you're not technically family in the legal sense. I understand the distinction you're making. He nodded, apparently satisfied that I'd accepted my new status gracefully. Mom hugged me goodbye, whispering, "Thank you for a lovely evening," without meeting my eyes. I could tell she was embarrassed by Richard's announcement, but didn't know how to address it without causing a bigger scene. The following Monday morning, I sat in my attorney's office reviewing the implications of Richard's estate planning announcement. Legally, he can structure his will however he wants, my attorney Sandra explained. If your mother agreed to exclude non-biological children from inheritance, that's their decision to make. I'm not concerned about Richard's money, I told her. I'm more interested in understanding what this means for Mom's assets. That depends on how their assets are titled. If they own everything jointly with rights of survivorship, then the surviving spouse inherits everything regardless of what their individual wills say. But if they have separate assets, then each person's will governs what happens to their individual property. What about life insurance? Life insurance bypasses the will entirely. It goes directly to the named beneficiaries according to the policy documents. I pulled out the insurance policy information I'd brought with me. Sandra reviewed it carefully, noting the beneficiary designation and premium payment history. This is interesting, she said. Your mother has a substantial life insurance policy with you as the sole beneficiary, and you've been paying the premiums. Unless she changes the beneficiary designation with the insurance company, this money goes to you regardless of what her will says. Even if her will specifically excludes non-biological children. Life insurance is a contract between the policyholder and the insurance company. The will has no effect on insurance proceeds unless the beneficiary designation specifically names the estate as beneficiary. And if Richard doesn't know about this policy, then he's in for a surprise if he's counting on it as part of his inheritance planning. That afternoon, I received a call from Mom asking if we could have lunch together. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from Richard's usual haunts. I owe you an apology, she said immediately after we'd ordered. Saturday night was. I didn't handle that well. You don't need to apologize for Richard's announcement. Yes, I do. The way he presented it, making it sound like we discussed it and agreed. That wasn't how it happened. She stirred her coffee nervously, organizing her thoughts. We did meet with an attorney about updating our wills. Richard has substantial assets from his business, and he wanted to ensure his children inherited his construction company and related investments. That part made sense to me. And your assets? That's where it got complicated. Richard assumed that since we're married, everything should be joint property with mutual inheritance rights. But some of my assets are separate. Things I owned before we married, my retirement accounts, my life insurance policy. What did you tell the attorney? I said I needed time to think about it. I've been meaning to talk to you about this, but Richard seemed to interpret my hesitation as agreement. She looked tired, older than her 65 years. The stress of trying to balance Richard's expectations with her own feelings was clearly wearing on her. Mom, you don't have to justify your financial decisions to me. Your money is yours to distribute however you think is right. But it's not just about money. It's about family, about belonging. When Richard made that announcement, it felt like he was publicly declaring that you're not really my daughter. Aren't I? Of course you are. You're my daughter, period. The fact that Richard's children share his DNA doesn't make them more family than you are. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the implications of Saturday night's announcement. "Can I ask you something?" Mom said finally. "When you took over paying my life insurance premiums, was that because you didn't trust Richard to handle it?" I considered how to answer honestly without being hurtful. "It was because I wanted to ensure the policy stayed current regardless of other circumstances. Your income fluctuates, and insurance companies don't accept late payments gracefully." "And the beneficiary designation?" "You're listed as the policyholder. You can change the beneficiaries anytime you want." She nodded slowly. "I should probably review all of that, make sure everything is current and reflects my actual wishes." "Probably a good idea. Would you help me? I know you handle your own business finances, so you understand these things better than I do." "Of course." The following week, Mom and I spent an afternoon reviewing all of her financial documents, bank accounts, retirement plans, the life insurance policy, and a small investment account she'd inherited from her parents. The picture that emerged was complicated. Most of her assets were indeed separate property, acquired before her marriage to Richard. Her teacher's retirement account, the life insurance policy, and the investment account were all in her name only. The house she and Richard lived in was jointly titled, as were their checking and savings accounts. But the majority of her wealth, approximately $850,000 between the retirement account, investment account, and life insurance, remained separate property that she could distribute according to her own wishes. "I had no idea it was this much," she admitted as we totaled everything up. "Your parents were good savers, and you've been contributing to your retirement account for 30 years. It adds up. Richard always handles our joint finances. I just assumed he knew about all of this." "Did you ever discuss your separate assets with him?" "Not in detail. He knows about the retirement account because I get statements, but I don't think he knows how much is in it. And I never mentioned the life insurance policy because you've been handling the payments." We spent another hour updating her beneficiary designations on all accounts. She decided to leave the retirement account jointly to me and Richard's children, the investment account entirely to me, and the life insurance policy unchanged with me as sole beneficiary. "Is this fair?" she asked as we finished the paperwork. "It's your money, Mom. Fair is whatever you decide it is." I keep thinking about what Richard said. Only blood family deserves inheritance. But you've been more family to me than anyone else. You visit regularly, you help with my finances, you include me in your life. His children are polite, but they're not really part of my daily existence. They're part of Richard's life, which makes them part of yours, in some ways. But when I think about who I trust, who I rely on, who would take care of me if I got sick, it's you. That has to count for something. 2 months later, I was reviewing quarterly profit reports for the restaurant when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Patricia, your stepfather is here asking to speak with you. He seems upset about something." I found Richard in the main dining room, pacing near the host station. It was 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, between lunch and dinner service, so the restaurant was nearly empty. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Of course. Would you like to sit down?" "I'll stand. This won't take long." His face was flushed, and I could see a vein throbbing at his temple. Whatever had prompted this visit, he was genuinely angry. "Linda told me about your little financial planning session," he began, going through her accounts, updating beneficiaries, making decisions without including me. I helped her review her personal financial documents at her request. I didn't think that required your involvement. I'm her husband. Everything she owns affects both of us. Her separate property affects her. Your separate property affects you. That's how separate property works. Don't get smart with me. I know what you're doing. What am I doing? You're manipulating an old woman into giving you money that should stay in the family. The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. Instead, I kept my voice level and professional. Richard, I've been paying Mom's life insurance premiums for 8 years. I've never asked her for money, never needed her financial support, never even discussed her estate planning until she specifically requested my help. That life insurance policy should have my name on it. We're married. Then you should have discussed that with her when you got married 8 years ago. I didn't know about it. That's between you and Mom. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. I know what you're worth, Patricia. I know about this restaurant, your property investments, your business accounts. You don't need Linda's money. I felt a chill of unease. Richard had been investigating my finances, which suggested this conversation was about more than just Mom's life insurance policy. You're right, I don't need Mom's money, which is why I've never asked for it. Then why not do the right thing? Convince her to change those beneficiaries to include my children. They're family too. They're your family. They'll inherit from you. That's not the point. What is the point? The point is respect, recognition. My children have been part of this family for 8 years. They deserve to be acknowledged. I understood now. This wasn't really about money. It was about validation. Richard wanted Mom's assets to flow to his children as proof that they were her real family, just like he declared at her birthday party. Richard, I can't convince Mom to do anything with her money. And I wouldn't try to. Those are her decisions to make. We'll see about that. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving me with an uncomfortable feeling that this wasn't over. That evening, Mom called me in tears. He's furious, she said through the phone. He's been yelling for an hour about family loyalty and blood relations and how you're manipulating me. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. He wants me to change all the beneficiaries to include Marcus and Cheryl equally. He says it's only fair since we're all one family now. What do you want to do? I don't know. I love Richard, but I feel like he's trying to control decisions that should be mine to make. And his children, they're nice enough, but they're not my children. They have their own mother, their own family traditions. I don't understand why they should inherit from me. You don't have to justify your decisions to anyone, including Richard. But it's causing problems in my marriage. He says if I don't include his children, it proves I don't really consider them family. Do you consider them family? She was quiet for a long moment. I consider them Richard's children whom I care about because I care about him. But that's different from considering them my children, isn't it? Only you can answer that. I keep thinking about what would happen if something happened to me tomorrow. Who would handle my affairs? Who would make sure my wishes were carried out? Who would take care of the details? Probably whoever you name as executor of your will. And who would I trust to do that job properly? The answer hung unspoken between us. We both knew that if Mom died tomorrow, I would be the one handling funeral arrangements, settling her affairs, and ensuring her wishes were respected. Richard would be greeting and dealing with his own emotional needs. His children would be focused on supporting their father. I would be the one managing the logistics. I'm going to stick with my original decision, she said finally. It's my money, and I'll distribute it however I think is right. Are you sure? I don't want to cause problems in your marriage. You're not causing problems. Richard's expectations are causing problems. 6 months later, I was preparing to leave for a restaurant industry conference in Miami when my assistant handed me a certified letter that had arrived that morning. The return address was from Richard's attorney. Inside was a formal legal notice informing me that Richard was contesting Mom's recent beneficiary changes on the grounds of undue influence and financial manipulation. The letter demanded that I provide all documentation related to my financial relationship with Mom, including records of the life insurance premium payments and any other financial transactions between us. I immediately called Sandra, my attorney. "This is intimidation," she said after reading the letter. "He has no legal standing to contest beneficiary designations on accounts that belong solely to your mother. Can he cause problems anyway? He can try, but the law is clear. As long as your mother is mentally competent and made these decisions voluntarily, no one can override her choices regarding her separate property." What about the undue influence claim? Difficult to prove when you've been financially supporting her rather than taking money from her. The premium payment history actually works in your favor. It shows you've been acting in her best interests for years. Should I be worried? Not legally, but this kind of harassment can be stressful and time-consuming. I'd recommend documenting everything and avoiding any direct confrontation with Richard. The conference in Miami provided a welcome distraction from family drama. I spent 3 days learning about new restaurant technologies, networking with other owners, and attending workshops on menu development and staff management. It felt good to focus on my business instead of Richard's legal threats. When I returned, I found a voicemail from Mom asking me to call her urgently. "Richard collapsed at work yesterday," she said when I reached her. "He had a massive heart attack. He's in the ICU at Presbyterian Hospital." I drove immediately to the hospital, where I found Mom in the cardiac care waiting room with Marcus and Cheryl. They looked up when I arrived, their expressions ranging from surprise to hostile. "How is he?" I asked Mom. "Critical but stable. The doctors say the next 48 hours will be crucial." I sat beside her, offering whatever comfort I could. Despite our recent conflicts, I didn't want Richard to die. He was Mom's husband, and his death would devastate her. "The doctors want to talk to family members about his care options," Marcus said pointedly. "Real family members." "Marcus," Mom said sharply, "this isn't the time." "When is the time?" "When we're dealing with funeral arrangements? When we're trying to figure out his business assets? When Patricia's trying to take control of everything?" The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Here we were, in a hospital waiting room while Richard fought for his life, and his son was still focused on excluding me from family decisions. "I'm not trying to take control of anything," I said quietly. "I just want to support Mom through this. By manipulating her finances and turning her against Dad's children. That's enough," Mom said, standing up abruptly. "I won't listen to this anymore." She walked out of the waiting room, leaving me alone with Marcus and Cheryl. The silence was uncomfortable, but not entirely unwelcome. "You know he's right," Cheryl said finally. "About you manipulating Mom. We know what you've been doing." "What have I been doing?" "Playing the devoted daughter while scheming to cut us out of her will. Paying her bills so she feels obligated to you. It's calculated and manipulative." I looked at her. This woman who visited Mom maybe once a month, who called only when she needed something, who had never once offered to help with Mom's finances or medical appointments or household maintenance. "Cheryl, I've been paying Mom's life insurance premiums for 8 years because I love her and want her to be financially secure. If that seems calculating to you, I'm sorry you interpret family responsibility that way." "Family responsibility? You're not even really family." "According to who?" "According to Dad. According to genetics. according to reality. I could have pointed out that I'd been Mom's daughter for 41 years while Cheryl had been her stepdaughter for 8. I could have mentioned that I was the one who drove Mom to doctor's appointments, helped her with technology problems, and called her every week just to chat. I could have explained that family is built through years of daily choices and shared experiences, not through DNA percentages or legal ceremonies. Instead, I just said, I think we'll have to agree to disagree about what makes someone family. Richard survived the heart attack, but required bypass surgery and weeks of recovery. During his hospitalization, I watched Mom transform from a wife seeking permission for her decisions into a woman remembering her own strength. Without Richard's daily opinions and expectations, she began making choices based on her own preferences rather than his approval. I've been thinking, she told me one afternoon as we walked through a hospital corridor after visiting Richard, about family and loyalty and what we owe each other. What conclusions have you reached? That love shouldn't require you to diminish other people you love. Richard wants me to prove my loyalty to his children by being disloyal to you. That's not how family should work. People have different definitions of family. Maybe, but I think mine is better. She stopped walking and turned to face me. I want you to know that regardless of what happens with Richard's health, regardless of what legal threats he makes, regardless of how his children treat you, you are my daughter. You're my family. And my financial decisions reflect that reality. Thank you. That means everything to me. I also want you to know that I'm proud of what you've built with your restaurant. I'm proud of your independence and your success. I'm proud that you've never needed to depend on anyone else's money or approval to create the life you wanted. We resumed walking, both lost in our own thoughts. Can I ask you something? She said as we reached the parking garage. Of course. If something happens to me, will you take care of Richard? I know he's been difficult, but he's still family. I'll make sure he's taken care of, I promised. Even after everything he said, family takes care of family, even difficult family. Richard recovered fully from his surgery, though the experience seemed to change his perspective on several things. He never formally apologized for the legal threats or the accusations about financial manipulation, but he stopped making them. Perhaps facing his own mortality had given him different priorities. Marcus and Cheryl remained distant, continuing to view me as an outsider who had somehow stolen their rightful inheritance. But they were civil during family gatherings, and that felt like progress. Mom's beneficiary designations remained unchanged. Her retirement account would be split equally among me, Marcus, and Cheryl, a compromise that acknowledged their place in her life without diminishing mine. Her investment account and life insurance policy remained solely in my name, providing her with the security of knowing someone she trusted completely would handle her final affairs. 2 years later, at Mom's 67th birthday party, this one held at my restaurant, but organized as a true celebration rather than a power demonstration, Richard stood up to make a toast. Linda, you've taught me a lot about family over the past few years, he said, his voice more subdued than the booming confidence of previous years. You've shown me that loyalty isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about who shows up, who pays attention, who cares enough to act. He paused, looking around the table at his children, at me, at Mom. I want to thank Patricia for taking care of you in ways I didn't always understand or appreciate, and I want to apologize for making things more complicated than they needed to be. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes acknowledgement is the first step toward understanding. That evening, as I cleaned up after the party, Mom helped me stack chairs, and collect leftover flowers. "That went better than expected," she said. "Much better. I think Richard is finally starting to understand that having me in his life doesn't require him to control my other relationships. That's a valuable lesson for anyone to learn. I'm grateful we made it through all of that drama without losing each other," she said, squeezing my hand. "Family is supposed to support each other, not compete for position." I couldn't agree more. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how much had changed since that first birthday announcement about real family only. We'd all learned something about the difference between biological relationships and chosen family, between inherited obligations and earned loyalty. The life insurance policy remained in my name. The premiums still automatically deducted from my business account each month. But it was no longer a symbol of exclusion or manipulation. It was simply what it had always been. One family member taking care of another, ensuring security and demonstrating love through practical action. And perhaps that's the most real definition of family there is. The smell of sawdust and aged oak still clung to my clothes as I pulled into the gravel driveway of my childhood home. It was Thursday evening, and I'd spent the last 12 hours in my father's workshop, carefully cataloging his tools for what I thought would be a proper inventory. Dad had been gone 3 months now, and I was finally ready to organize the space that had been his sanctuary for over 30 years. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm a master carpenter with 15 years of experience building custom furniture for clients across the Pacific Northwest. Everything I knew about woodworking, I learned from my father, Thomas Morrison, in that very workshop behind our family home in rural Oregon. While other kids played video games, I was learning to read wood grain, understanding the difference between a Mortise chisel and a paring chisel, and developing the patience that separates true craftsmen from weekend hobbyists. What most people didn't know was that my expertise extended beyond woodworking. During my time at Oregon State, I'd double majored in forestry and geology, writing my senior thesis on mineral deposits in the Cascade Range. I understood soil composition, mineral rights law, and land surveying almost as well as I understood dovetail joints and wood finishing. The house looked different in the fading light. My mother, Linda, had remarried 2 years ago to Frank Kellerman, a loud, heavy-set man who sold insurance and treated our family property like his personal kingdom. Frank had never understood my father's workshop, viewing it as a waste of valuable space that could be better utilized. As I walked toward the back door, something felt wrong. The workshop, which should have been locked tight, stood wide open. Light spilled from the doorway, and I could hear voices, multiple voices, coming from inside. I quickened my pace, rounding the corner of the house to see a sight that stopped me cold. 3 men were systematically loading my father's tools into a large pickup truck. His prized 1952 Delta table saw, the hand planes he'd inherited from his own father, the custom-built workbench where I'd learned to turn my first bowl. Everything was being carried out like inventory from a closing store. "Hey!" I called out, breaking into a run. "What the hell is going on here?" Frank emerged from the workshop, a clipboard in his hand and a satisfied smirk on his face. He wore his usual uniform, khaki pants that strained against his belly, a polo shirt with visible sweat stains, and the kind of cheap dress shoes that squeaked when he walked. "Jake," he said, not bothering to look apologetic, "didn't expect you back so soon. Why are these men taking my father's tools?" I demanded, watching as one of them struggled to load Dad's precision router table. Frank's smirk widened. "Your daddy's gone, boy. Time to stop living in the past." The casual cruelty of those words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at the men loading the truck, They moved with the efficiency of professionals, clearly not random thieves but legitimate buyers who'd arranged this transaction. "You sold them," I said, the reality sinking in. "Damn right I did," Frank replied, consulting his clipboard. $8,000 for the lot. Not bad for a bunch of old tools gathering dust. $8,000. I knew the value of those tools better than anyone. The Lie-Nielsen hand planes alone were worth $3,000. The vintage Stanley chisels, still sharp after decades of use, were collector's items worth hundreds each. The total value was closer to $30,000. "You can't do this," I said, stepping toward the truck. "These tools belong to who?" Frank cut me off. "Your dad's dead, Jake. And last I checked, this property belongs to me and your mother now." One of the buyers, a thin man with calloused hands, looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we should wait," he said to Frank. "If there's a family dispute." "There's no dispute," Frank said firmly. "I've got the bill of sale right here. Everything's legal." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and waved it in my direction. I could see my mother's signature at the bottom, right next to Frank's scrawled name. "Where's my mother?" I asked. "Linda's inside watching her shows. She agrees this is for the best. Can't have you hanging around here forever, playing with Daddy's toys." The men continued loading, and I watched each piece of my inheritance disappear into the truck bed. The spokeshave my father had made by hand. The mortising machine he'd saved for months to buy. The collection of wooden handles, each one worn smooth by decades of use. "This isn't over," I said quietly. Frank laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the workshop walls. "Yeah, it is. You need to grow up, Jake. Find yourself a real job instead of playing carpenter with dead man's tools." I watched the truck drive away, taillights disappearing into the Oregon darkness. Frank headed back toward the house, whistling tunelessly, leaving me standing in the empty workshop. The space felt hollow now, echoing with the absence of 30 years of accumulated craftsmanship. But as I stood there in the dim light, I remembered something Frank had overlooked, something my father had specifically mentioned to me just months before his death. "Jake," Dad had said, sitting on his workbench after finishing a particularly challenging restoration project, "there's something you need to know about this land. Something I never told Linda or anyone else." He pulled out a manila envelope from his desk drawer, yellowed with age. Inside were documents I'd barely glanced at then, focused as I was on learning his techniques for steam-bending wood. When my father bought this property in 1963, Dad had continued. He made sure to retain the mineral rights, separate from the surface rights. "I've never done anything with them, but they're yours when I'm gone, all legal and proper." At the time, I'd nodded absently, more interested in discussing lumber grades than legal documents. But now, standing in the violated space of my father's workshop, those words took on new significance. I drove home to my apartment in town, my mind racing. That night, I pulled out every document my father had ever given me, searching through the box I'd stored in my closet after his funeral. Birth certificates, insurance papers, the deed to his workshop space, and there, at the bottom, the mineral rights documentation. The papers were complex, full of legal language that took me hours to parse, but the essentials were clear. Thomas Morrison had retained exclusive mineral rights to a 12-acre parcel that included the workshop, the surrounding forest, and the hillside behind the house. Those rights were specifically bequeathed to me, his son, completely separate from any property transfer involving the surface land. More importantly, I remembered something from my geology coursework. The Cascade Range was rich in zeolite deposits, minerals used in water filtration, industrial catalysts, and construction materials. A professor had mentioned that particular area of Oregon as having significant commercial potential that had never been properly surveyed. The next morning, I called Peterson Geological Surveys, a firm I'd worked with during my university research. Dr. Amanda Peterson had been my thesis advisor and one of the few people who understood both the academic and commercial aspects of mineral exploration. "Jake," she said when I explained the situation, "are you certain about the mineral rights?" "Completely certain. I got the documentation." "And your stepfather sold surface assets without realizing he doesn't own what's underneath?" "That's exactly what happened." There was a pause. "You know, I've been wanting to do a survey of that area for years. The geological reports from the 1970s suggested significant zeolite deposits, but no one ever followed up." Within a week, Dr. Peterson had arranged for a full mineral survey of the property. The process required accessing the land, which meant dealing with Frank and my mother. I drove out to the house on a Saturday morning, armed with legal documents and a surveyor's map. Frank was in the backyard, grilling burgers and drinking beer despite the early hour. When he saw me approaching with a folder full of papers, his expression shifted from casual hostility to genuine irritation. "What do you want now, Jake? Come to cry about the tools some more?" "I need to inform you that I'll be conducting a geological survey of the mineral deposits on this property," I said, keeping my voice level. Frank nearly choked on his beer. "The what now?" I handed him a copy of the mineral rights deed. My father retained mineral rights to this land when he transferred surface ownership. I'm exercising those rights to conduct a commercial survey. He stared at the document like it was written in hieroglyphics. "Mineral rights? What the hell are you talking about?" "The legal right to extract minerals from beneath the surface of this property. It's completely separate from surface ownership." Frank's face was turning red, the way it always did when he encountered something he didn't understand, but sensed was threatening to his authority. "This is bullshit," he said, waving the papers. "You can't just come onto my property and start digging holes." "Actually, I can. The mineral rights grant me legal access to the property for the purpose of exploration and extraction. You'll want to have your attorney review those documents." My mother appeared on the back porch, drawn by the sound of Frank's raised voice. Linda Morrison Kellerman was a small woman who'd always deferred to the men in her life. First my father, and now Frank. "What's going on?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Your son thinks he can dig up my backyard," Frank said. "It's not your backyard when it comes to mineral rights," I corrected. Dad made sure of that. The survey took 3 days. Dr. Peterson's team used ground-penetrating radar, soil samples, and core drilling to map the subsurface geology. Frank spent most of those 3 days standing on the porch, glowering at the activity, but legally powerless to stop it. On the third evening, Dr. Peterson called with preliminary results. "Jake," she said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice, "you need to sit down." "What did you find?" "One of the richest zeolite deposits I've ever surveyed, high-grade clinoptilolite, running through the entire hillside. Conservative estimates put the commercial value at over $2 million. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. $2 million. Minimum. Could be significantly more depending on extraction efficiency and market conditions. There's enough here to supply the entire Pacific Northwest water treatment industry for decades." That night, I called 3 mining companies that specialized in zeolite extraction. By morning, I had preliminary offers from all three, with the highest bid coming in at $2.3 million for exclusive extraction rights over a 10-year period. The irony wasn't lost on me. Frank had sold $8,000 worth of my father's tools to clean up the property, not realizing he was sitting on a fortune that belonged to me. I waited a full week before returning to the house. This time, I brought my attorney, Marcus Webb, a man who specialized in mineral rights law and had handled several major extraction deals in Oregon. Frank was washing his car in the driveway when we pulled up. He straightened slowly, water dripping from the sponge in his hand, watching us approach with obvious suspicion. "Frank," I said politely, "this is Marcus Webb, my attorney. We need to discuss the mineral survey results." Frank's expression shifted from suspicion to alarm. "What kind of results?" Marcus stepped forward, briefcase in hand. "Mr. Kellerman, my client's mineral survey has revealed commercially viable deposits beneath this property. We're here to notify you of pending extraction operations." "Extraction operations?" Frank's voice cracked slightly. I opened a folder and showed him the survey maps. "There's a zeolite deposit running through the entire hillside behind the house, worth approximately $2.3 million in extraction rights." Frank stared at the geological charts as if they might suddenly make sense. "What does this mean?" "It means," Marcus said, "that Mr. Morrison has legal right to extract those minerals. The process will require heavy machinery, excavation equipment, and around-the-clock operations for several months." The color drained from Frank's face. "Heavy machinery? On my property?" "The mineral rights include surface access for extraction purposes," I explained. "We'll need to bring in mining equipment, establish staging areas, and create access roads for the trucks." "You can't do this," Frank said, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus pulled out another set of documents. "Mr. Kellerman, I suggest you review these mineral rights provisions carefully. Your attorney will confirm that surface owners have very limited ability to restrict subsurface extraction activities." Frank looked around wildly, as if searching for someone to appeal to. "Linda," he called toward the house. My mother emerged, looking tired and confused. She'd aged noticeably since my father's death, and Frank's constant belittling had only made things worse. "What's happening?" she asked. "Your son is trying to destroy our property," Frank said. "I'm exercising legal rights that Dad specifically left to me," I corrected. "The same way you exercised your right to sell his tools." The parallel wasn't lost on my mother. She looked from Frank to me, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. "How much money?" she asked quietly. "The mineral rights are worth $2.3 million, Marcus replied. Frank's knees actually buckled. He leaned against his half-washed car, staring at us in horror. $2 million. 300,000. I corrected. The extraction company's offer is for $2.3 million. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Frank opened and closed his mouth several times, but no words came out. Finally, he managed to speak. "There has to be some mistake." "No mistake," Marcus said. "The geological survey is conclusive, and the mineral rights documentation is ironclad. Mr. Morrison's father was very thorough when he structured the property transfer." I watched Frank process this information, seeing the exact moment he realized what he'd done. He'd sold my father's tools for $8,000 while sitting on land that would generate nearly 300 times that amount. Land he couldn't touch legally. "The extraction process will begin in 6 weeks," I continued. "You'll want to prepare for significant disruption to your daily routine." "Disruption?" Frank's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus consulted his notes. Excavation equipment operates from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 6 days a week. There will be truck traffic, industrial noise, and temporary access roads through portions of the surface property. Frank sank onto the hood of his car, the weight of his mistake finally hitting him. This will destroy the property value. Surface property value, I agreed. But as you pointed out, I need to stop living in the past. My mother stepped forward, her voice small. Jake, is there any way to work something out? I looked at her, remembering how she'd signed the papers to sell Dad's tools without even consulting me. What kind of arrangement did you have in mind? Maybe we could share the mineral rights, since it's family? Frank perked up at this, nodding eagerly. Yeah, family should stick together. I pretended to consider the offer. Well, I suppose family is important. You're right about that. Hope flickered in Frank's eyes. Of course, I continued. I wasn't considered family when you sold my father's life's work to strangers. But I'm willing to discuss terms. What terms? Frank asked desperately. First, you'll return every tool you sold from my father's workshop. That's impossible, Frank protested. I don't even know who bought them all. Marcus consulted his briefcase again. Actually, we've been able to track most of the purchases through the auction house records. The total buyback cost would be approximately $15,000. Frank's face went pale again. $15,000? You said you sold them for $8,000. That was a wholesale price to a dealer, I explained. Retail replacement cost is nearly double. Second, I continued, you'll sign over surface ownership of the workshop and surrounding 2 acres back to me. Fair market value is about $40,000. $55,000 total, Frank calculated weakly. And third, I said you'll publicly apologize for your disrespect to my father's memory and acknowledge that you were wrong to dispose of his tools without consulting his son. Frank looked like he might be sick. And if I agree to all that, then I'll pay you 10% of the mineral extraction proceeds, about $230,000 over the 10-year contract period. It wasn't a generous offer, but it was more money than Frank would see in a lifetime of selling insurance, and it was far more than he deserved. We'll need your decision within 48 hours, Marcus said. The extraction company requires clarity on surface access agreements before they begin operations. As we drove away, I could see Frank in my rearview mirror, still sitting on his car hood, staring at the hillside behind his house like it had personally betrayed him. The next morning, Frank called my attorney. He agreed to every term. The buyback process took 3 weeks. Frank had to liquidate part of his retirement savings to purchase the tools from their new owners, many of whom were reluctant to sell. The 1952 Delta table saw alone cost him $2,200 to buy back, nearly 3 times what he'd sold it for. I was there when the tools returned to the workshop, watching Frank personally carry each piece back to its original place. His hands shook as he positioned my father's hand planes on their designated shelf, and sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cool Oregon weather. This the last of them, Frank said as he placed the final chisels set on the workbench. I ran my hand along the familiar surface of my father's most prized possession, the custom workbench he built from old-growth Douglas fir. You know, Frank, these tools are worth more than you paid to get them back. His shoulders sagged. I figured that out. My father spent 30 years collecting these. Each one has a story, a purpose. They're not just tools. They're a legacy. Frank nodded miserably. I didn't understand. No, I agreed. You didn't. The mineral extraction began 2 months later. True to Marcus's warning, the operation completely disrupted life at the house. Massive trucks rumbled past Frank's front door at all hours, hauling zeolite ore to processing facilities in Portland. The noise was constant, the dust inevitable. Frank and my mother moved into a rental house in town after the second week. The insurance salesman who'd been so proud of his rural property found himself essentially homeless, watching from a distance as heavy machinery carved into the hillside behind what had been his sanctuary. The extraction process revealed even more extensive deposits than Dr. Peterson had initially projected. The mining company increased their offer twice, eventually settling on a total contract value of $2.8 million. Frank's 10% amounted to $280,000, paid in quarterly installments over the contract period. It was more money than he'd ever seen at once, but it came with a constant reminder of how much more he'd cost himself through ignorance and greed. On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Frank had sold my father's tools, I stood in the restored workshop, running my hand along the familiar workbench. Every tool was back in its proper place, the space once again feeling like the sanctuary my father had intended. The mineral extraction was nearly complete, the hillside scarred, but healing. Frank and my mother had moved permanently to town, unable to tolerate the disruption to their quiet rural life. They'd eventually sold their surface rights to a developer who planned to build vacation cabins once the mining operation concluded. I used a portion of the mineral proceeds to purchase those surface rights myself, ensuring that my father's workshop would remain undisturbed. The rest of the money went into a trust fund that would support my woodworking business and eventually fund a vocational school for traditional crafts. Sometimes I think about Frank's incredulous question, $2 million? He'd said it like an accusation, as if I'd somehow cheated him by knowing things he didn't. But that was always his problem. He never understood that knowledge has value, that respecting the past can unlock the future, and that dismissing someone as a dreamy boy playing with daddy's toys can be the most expensive mistake of your life. My father had taught me that good craftsmanship requires patience, attention to detail, and respect for the materials you work with. Those same principles applied to legal documents, mineral rights, and family relationships. Frank had failed to understand any of them. As I selected a chisel from my father's restored collection and began work on a new project, I could almost hear Dad's voice echoing in the workshop. Measure twice, cut once, son. And always check your facts before you make a deal. It was advice Frank probably wished he'd received before he decided to sell a dead man's tools and sit on a fortune he didn't know he couldn't touch. The workshop was quiet now, except for the familiar sounds of woodworking, the whisper of sharp steel through aged hardwood, the gentle tap of mallet on chisel, the soft susurrus of sandpaper smoothing rough edges. These were the sounds of patience rewarded, of legacy preserved, and of justice served with compound interest. Outside, autumn rain drummed against the windows, and the scarred hillside slowly began its recovery. But inside the workshop, surrounded by my father's tools and sustained by his wisdom, everything was exactly as it should be. Elizabeth, we need to discuss the living arrangements now that your father is gone. Patricia's voice carried that familiar tone of false concern mixed with barely concealed authority as she approached me in the kitchen where I was arranging funeral flowers. The house was full of mourners paying their respects to Dad, but my stepmother had clearly decided this was the perfect time for family business. I continued cutting stems and placing white lilies in the crystal vase Dad had given me for my college graduation. The same vase Patricia had tried to convince him was too expensive for a stepdaughter's gift 8 years ago. My hands remained steady despite the conversation I knew was coming. Of course, Patricia. Though I think today might not be the most appropriate time for practical matters. She smoothed her black dress and checked her reflection in the kitchen window. Even at Dad's funeral, Patricia managed to look like she was attending a charity gala rather than mourning her husband of 12 years. Her makeup was flawless, her hair professionally styled, her jewelry expensive but tasteful. The picture of a grieving widow who somehow looked better than most people did on their best days. I disagree, she said, leaning against the granite counter Dad had installed when I was in high school. Delay only makes these conversations more difficult. We're adults here. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see my half-siblings holding court in the living room. Austin, 22, and fresh out of college with a business degree he barely earned, was explaining investment strategies to Dad's old friends from the engineering firm. Melanie, 24, and perpetually between jobs, was describing her latest plans to start a lifestyle blog to anyone who would listen. Both of them had inherited Patricia's talent for presenting confidence in place of competence. Both had also inherited her belief that the world owed them everything they wanted simply because they wanted it. What specifically did you want to discuss? I asked, though I already knew. Patricia had been dropping hints for months about how expensive it was to maintain Dad's house. How much more practical it would be for everyone if living arrangements were optimized. Well, she began, her voice taking on that artificially sweet tone she used when she was about to say something cruel. This house is quite large for one person, and with Austin planning to get married next year, and Melanie needing a stable base while she establishes her career. I placed another lily in the vase, taking my time to get the arrangement just right. Dad had taught me patience during the 3 years he battled cancer. Patience with insurance companies, with doctors, with well-meaning relatives who offered advice about treatments they didn't understand. Most importantly, patience with Patricia, who spent those 3 years positioning herself and her children for the inevitable. Are you suggesting I move out? I asked calmly. I'm suggesting we be realistic about everyone's needs. Patricia pulled out one of the kitchen bar stools and sat down, clearly settling in for a longer conversation. You have your career, your independence. Austin and Melanie are still finding their footing. This house would give them the stability they need. My career, as if being a senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms was some kind of hobby I could relocate anywhere. As if the 15 years I'd spent building my practice, the clients who depended on my expertise, the junior partners I mentored, were all easily transferable. I see, I said, moving to the next vase. And where exactly would I be finding this career-focused independence? There are lovely condominiums downtown, much more suitable for a single professional woman, less maintenance, better security, closer to your office. I almost smiled at the word suitable. Patricia had strong opinions about what was suitable for various types of people. Stepdaughters, apparently, were suitable for downtown condominiums rather than family homes where they'd grown up. That's an interesting perspective, I replied. Have you discussed this with Austin and Melanie? Of course. They're both very concerned about your well-being. Living alone in such a large house can't be healthy for someone your age. Someone my age. I was 35, hardly a spinster requiring intervention. But in Patricia's worldview, unmarried women over 30 were objects of pity who needed guidance from more successful wives and mothers. Through the doorway, I watched Austin gesture expansively while explaining something to Mr. Henderson from Dad's old firm. Austin had Dad's height and Patricia's confidence, but none of Dad's substance. He'd graduated college with a 2.3 GPA and no job prospects, but Patricia had convinced Dad that Austin just needed time to find his passion. Melanie was showing her phone to a group of church ladies, probably displaying her latest Instagram posts. She'd been finding herself for 6 years since high school, starting and abandoning various creative pursuits whenever they required actual work. "I appreciate your concern," I said, "but I'm quite comfortable here. This is my home." Patricia's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The artificial sweetness hardened into something more recognizable. "Elizabeth, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. This house belonged to your father, and now it belongs to his family. I am his family. You're his stepdaughter. Austin and Melanie are his blood." There it was. The distinction Patricia had been carefully avoiding for 12 years while she needed Dad's support for her children's endless expenses. When Austin needed college tuition, I was family. When Melanie needed a car, I was family. When Patricia wanted expensive renovations, I was family. But now that Dad was gone, I was just the stepdaughter who needed to make room for the real children. "I see," I said quietly, "and you've determined that blood relation supersedes 15 years of residence here." I've determined that practical considerations matter more than sentiment. Austin needs space for his fiancée when they marry. Melanie needs a quiet environment to focus on building her business. You need independence and the freedom to build your own life. My own life. As if I hadn't been building my own life for years while also caring for Dad through his illness, managing his medical care, handling his legal affairs, and watching Patricia systematically position herself and her children as his primary beneficiaries. "That's very thoughtful of you to consider everyone's needs so carefully," I said. "I assume you've also considered the practical aspects of this arrangement." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Details can be worked out. The important thing is that we all understand what's best for the family." I finished the second flower arrangement and turned to face her directly. "Patricia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you remember 3 years ago when Dad updated his will after his first cancer diagnosis?" Her carefully composed expression flickered. "Vaguely. He was very sick, making arrangements. He was very thorough, actually. He spent months with his attorney making sure everything was properly documented and legally sound." "Elizabeth, I don't think this is the time to discuss legal technicalities. When would be a better time?" "After I've moved to one of those suitable downtown condominiums." Patricia stood up from the bar stool, her posture becoming more rigid. "I think you're being deliberately difficult about a very straightforward family matter." Family matters often involve legal technicalities, don't they? Especially when they concern property ownership and inheritance rights. The house was your father's. Now it belongs to his widow and children. I nodded slowly. His widow and children. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Before Patricia could respond, Austin appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Mom, people are starting to leave. Should we do the speech now?" Patricia glanced at me, then back at Austin. "Yes, I think it's time." I followed them into the living room where the remaining guests had gathered. Perhaps 30 people, mostly Dad's colleagues from the engineering firm, neighbors, and church friends. Patricia positioned herself near the fireplace, with Austin and Melanie flanking her like bodyguards. "Thank you all for being here today to honor Robert's memory," Patricia began, her voice carrying the perfect note of dignified grief. "He would have been so moved by the love and support you've shown our family during this difficult time." Our family. I noticed how smoothly she positioned herself and her children as the primary mourners while I stood apart near the kitchen doorway. As we begin the process of healing and moving forward, Patricia continued, we want you to know that Robert's legacy will live on through the values he instilled in Austin and Melanie. His children will carry his memory in everything they do. His children. Again, the careful exclusion wrapped in seemingly inclusive language. Robert was a man who believed in family above all else. Patricia said, her voice growing stronger. He worked hard to provide for us, to give us a foundation we could build on. This house, his life's work, everything he accomplished was for his family. I watched the faces of Dad's friends and colleagues. Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen from next door kept glancing at me with concern. They all knew I'd been the one caring for Dad during his illness, managing his affairs, making sure his wishes were respected. Now, Patricia continued, we have some difficult decisions to make about maintaining Robert's legacy. The practical realities of keeping his memory alive while moving forward as a family. She paused, looking directly at me. This house has been the center of our family for so many years. Austin and Melanie grew up here, and it's important that they continue to have that foundation as they build their own families. I saw where this was going. A public announcement designed to pressure me into compliance through social expectation. Elizabeth has been wonderful, Patricia said, her tone suggesting charity rather than gratitude. She's been like a daughter to Robert, and we're so grateful for everything she's done. But we all understand that it's time for her to spread her wings, to build her own life independent of the family nest. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. The manipulation was transparent to anyone who knew our family dynamics. So, Patricia said, her voice taking on a tone of finality, this house belongs to my real children now. Elizabeth will be transitioning to her own place, giving Austin and Melanie the space they need to honor their father's memory. The room fell quiet. Austin nodded approvingly. Melanie smiled, that self-satisfied expression she perfected since childhood whenever she got something she wanted. Pack your things and leave by Sunday, Patricia concluded, looking at me with the expression of someone who just solved a complex problem. It's what Robert would have wanted. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Dad's friends and colleagues stared at their hands, at the floor, anywhere but at the family drama unfolding in front of them. I walked calmly across the living room to the kitchen, opened the drawer where Dad kept important documents, and retrieved a manila folder I'd placed there that morning. The same drawer where he'd always kept insurance papers, utility bills, and legal documents that needed to be easily accessible. Returning to the living room, I placed the folder on the coffee table in front of Patricia. The gesture was quiet, simple, completely without drama. Before everyone leaves, I said calmly, there's something you should see. Patricia looked at the folder suspiciously. Elizabeth, what is this? I opened the folder and pulled out the top document. This is the property deed for this house, updated 3 years ago when Dad revised his estate planning. Patricia's confident expression began to waver. I don't understand what you're trying to prove. The deed shows current ownership of the property. I held up the document so the guests could see the official county seal and legal formatting. Would you like me to read the owner's name? The room was completely silent now. Austin stopped his self-satisfied nodding. Melanie's smile disappeared. Elizabeth Margaret Harrison. I read aloud. Sole owner as of March 15th, 3 years ago. Patricia snatched the document from my hands, her eyes scanning the legal language frantically. This can't be right. Robert owned this house. Dad transferred ownership to me when he was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, I explained to the room. His attorney recommended it as part of comprehensive estate planning to avoid probate complications and ensure property security. Patricia was still staring at the deed, her face cycling through expressions of confusion, anger, and panic. But he didn't tell me. He told me he was protecting his most important investment, I said quietly. This house and the person who had actually been taking care of it. Austin stepped forward, his earlier confidence completely gone. This has to be some kind of mistake. I pulled out another document. This is the certificate of title transfer, signed by Dad and notarized by his attorney. Would you like to see the attorney's contact information to verify authenticity? Melanie finally found her voice. But Mom said we were inheriting the house. Your mother made an assumption, I replied. The house wasn't part of Dad's estate because he'd already transferred ownership 3 years ago. Patricia was reading the deed more carefully now, and I could see the moment she understood what she was looking at. Legal language was clear when you took time to actually read it. Elizabeth, she said, her voice much smaller than it had been during her speech, surely we can work something out. Robert intended for all of us to benefit from this property. Did he? I asked. Because when he transferred ownership to me, he was very specific about his reasoning. Would you like me to share what he told his attorney? The guests were watching this exchange like spectators at a tennis match. Mr. Henderson had pulled out his phone, probably texting his wife about the drama unfolding at Robert Harrison's funeral reception. Dad told his attorney that he was transferring the house to the person who had demonstrated the greatest responsibility and commitment to the family. I continued. The person who had been managing household finances, coordinating his medical care, and ensuring that family obligations were met. Patricia's perfectly composed facade was cracking. I was dealing with grief, supporting the children through a difficult time. You were planning their futures, I corrected. Which is understandable, but Dad was planning too. I pulled out a third document. This is a letter Dad wrote to me when he signed the property transfer. Would you like me to read it? Elizabeth, please. Patricia said quickly. Let's discuss this privately. I think we've moved past private discussions, I replied. You made your announcement publicly. The response should be equally public. I unfolded the letter Dad had written in his careful engineer's handwriting. Elizabeth, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and someone has challenged your ownership of our home. I want everyone to understand why I made this decision. The room was dead silent now. Even Austin and Melanie had stopped their whispering. For 15 years, Elizabeth has been the stability in our family. When I married Patricia, Elizabeth welcomed her and her children with grace and maturity beyond her years. When I got sick, Elizabeth managed every aspect of my care while maintaining her demanding career. When bills needed paying, Elizabeth paid them. When decisions needed making, Elizabeth made them. Patricia had gone very pale. The letter was destroying the narrative she'd constructed about family hierarchy and blood relations. Austin and Melanie are good children, I continued reading, but they have never demonstrated the responsibility or commitment that homeownership requires. Patricia has many wonderful qualities, but practical management is not among them. Elizabeth has proven herself to be the true keeper of our family's foundation. I folded the letter carefully. He ended by saying that he hoped his decision would be respected, and that anyone who couldn't accept it was welcome to find alternative living arrangements. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia sank into the nearest chair, looking like someone who'd just been told their lottery ticket was a fake. Austin stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. This isn't fair. We grew up here too. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. You did grow up here, in the house where I've lived for 15 years, paying property taxes, maintenance costs, and utilities, while you focused on your education and career development. But we're family, Melanie protested. Yes, we are. Which is why you're welcome to continue living here under the same arrangement you've always had, as my guests. Patricia's head snapped up. Your guests? Patricia, you just announced that I should pack my things and leave by Sunday. You declared that this house belongs to your real children now. But since I own the house, I think we need to revisit those living arrangements. The legal training that had made me a successful attorney was serving me well now. Keep emotion out of it. Focus on facts. Let the other side reveal their true motivations through their own words. I have a proposal, I continued. Austin, you're welcome to continue living here rent-free until your wedding, as originally planned. Melanie, you can stay until you establish stable employment and can afford your own place. Patricia. I paused, looking at my stepmother who had just tried to evict me from my own home at my father's funeral. Patricia, you have until the end of the month to decide whether you can accept living in a house owned by your stepdaughter or whether you'd prefer to find one of those suitable downtown condominiums you mentioned. The guests began quietly gathering their coats and purses. The entertainment was over, and they clearly wanted to escape before the family drama escalated further. Mrs. Chen approached me as she prepared to leave. Elizabeth, your father would be proud of how you handled this. Mr. Henderson shook my hand. If you need anything, legal advice, references, anything at all, please call. One by one, Dad's friends and colleagues offered their support before leaving. It was clear who they saw as Robert Harrison's true successor. After the last guest left, the four of us stood in the living room that had just witnessed Patricia's public humiliation. The flower arrangements I'd made that morning looked strangely cheerful in the aftermath of the confrontation. Elizabeth, Patricia said finally, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't think there has been, I replied. You were very clear about your position. I'm just explaining mine. Austin was still studying the property deed like it might change if he stared at it long enough. This doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't Dad tell us he was transferring the house? He did tell you, I said. 3 years ago, when he called a family meeting to discuss his estate planning. You were busy with college, and Melanie was traveling in Europe. Neither of you attended. Melanie's face flushed. We didn't know it was important. Dad's legal affairs weren't important enough to interrupt your spring break plans. Patricia stood up abruptly. That's enough. Elizabeth, we need to discuss this reasonably. We tried reasonable discussion in the kitchen. I reminded her. You informed me that I needed to pack my things and leave by Sunday to make room for your real children. How exactly would you like to make that reasonable? I was emotional, dealing with grief. You were strategic, positioning your children for maximum benefit. Unfortunately, you didn't verify property ownership before making your announcement. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden Dad and I had planted together over the years. The roses he'd helped me choose, the fruit trees we planted for privacy, the vegetables patch where he taught me about soil composition and drainage. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face them. Austin, your wedding plans don't change. You can continue living here until then. Melanie, you have 6 months to find stable employment and your own housing. Patricia, you have 30 days to decide whether you want to live peacefully in my house or find alternative arrangements. Your house, Patricia repeated bitterly. My house, I confirmed. The house Dad legally transferred to me because he trusted me to preserve what he built. Austin was still processing the implications. But what about inheritance? The will? The will covers Dad's personal property, savings, and investments. The house was already mine, so it wasn't part of his estate. I pulled out one final document. Here's the breakdown of Dad's actual estate. Patricia inherits his savings and retirement accounts. You and Melanie inherit his investment portfolio. I inherit his personal property and continue owning the house I've owned for 3 years. Patricia snatched the estate summary and read it quickly. Her face went through several expressions as she realized that Dad's liquid assets, while comfortable, weren't nearly enough to buy another house like this one. This is manipulative, she said finally. Robert was sick, probably not thinking clearly. Dad was an engineer, Patricia. He thought clearly right up until the end. His attorney will confirm that he was completely competent when he made these decisions. I'm calling a lawyer, Austin announced. That's your right, I replied. But you should know that Dad's attorney specifically documented his reasoning for the property transfer. He anticipated that there might be challenges. I gathered the documents back into their folder. The attorney's contact information is in Dad's desk if you want to verify anything I've told you. Melanie was crying now, probably realizing that her comfortable lifestyle was about to change dramatically. This isn't what Dad would have wanted. Melanie, Dad lived with his decision for 3 years. If he'd wanted to change it, he had plenty of opportunities. Patricia was staring at the floor, her earlier confidence completely shattered. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem to solve, I said quietly. 3 hours ago, you told me to pack my things and leave by Sunday. You declared that this house belongs to your real children. You made your position very clear. I was upset, grieving. You were calculating, just like you calculated that Dad would leave everything to you and your children, just like you calculated that I would quietly accept whatever arrangement you decided was suitable. I walked toward the stairs leading to my bedroom. I'm going to rest now. It's been a long day. Feel free to use the kitchen if you need anything. Elizabeth, wait. Patricia called. We need to resolve this. I paused at the bottom of the stairs. Patricia, there's nothing to resolve. I own this house. Dad intended for me to own this house. You attempted to evict me at his funeral. Those are the facts. But we're family, she said desperately. Yes, we are. Which is why I'm not evicting you immediately like you tried to do to me. You have 30 days to adjust to the new reality. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, leaving Patricia, Austin, and Melanie to contemplate the difference between assumed authority and actual legal ownership. From my bedroom window, I could see neighbors' houses where I'd lived my entire adult life. The community where I'd built relationships, established roots, created the stability Dad had valued so highly. Patricia had calculated that grief and social pressure would force me to accept her version of family hierarchy. She'd assumed that being the biological mother gave her authority over the stepdaughter. She'd been wrong about everything except my commitment to preserving what Dad had built. Over the next 3 weeks, the household dynamics shifted dramatically. Austin spent most of his time at his fiancée's apartment, avoiding the tension. Melanie alternated between sulking and making half-hearted attempts to find employment. Patricia maintained icy politeness while clearly hoping I would change my mind about the ownership arrangement. On day 28 of her 30-day deadline, Patricia knocked on my bedroom door. Elizabeth, may I come in? I was reading case files for Monday's court appearance, but I set them aside. Of course. She entered tentatively, no longer carrying herself with the authority she displayed at Dad's funeral. I found an apartment downtown. One of those suitable condominiums I mentioned. I hope it works well for you, Elizabeth, I owe you an apology. I was wrong to assume that the house would automatically be mine. I was wrong to try to evict you. And I was wrong to dismiss your role in this family. I studied her carefully. The apology sounded genuine, but Patricia had always been skilled at saying what people wanted to hear when it served her purposes. I appreciate that, Patricia. Would you consider allowing me to stay? I could pay rent, contribute to household expenses. I was quiet for a long moment. The practical side of me recognized that Patricia's rent payments would help with the considerable costs of maintaining the house. But the protective side remembered her standing in the living room declaring that the house belonged to her real children. Patricia, can I ask you something? Of course. If our situations were reversed, if you owned this house and I had tried to evict you at Dad's funeral, would you be offering me a chance to stay as a tenant? She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she shook her head. Probably not. Then you understand my position. I do. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Robert was right to trust you with this house. You've been a better daughter to him than I was a wife, and a better family member than Austin and Melanie have been siblings. After she left, I returned to my case files. Monday's court appearance was a complex property dispute, the kind of case that required careful attention to legal documentation and ownership rights. The same skills that had protected my own home were now serving my clients. Patricia moved out 2 days later with minimal drama. Austin stayed until his wedding 6 months later, maintaining polite distance, but gradually warming to the reality that I wasn't the villain in his family's story. Melanie found a job and an apartment, discovering that independence could be empowering rather than terrifying. A year later, I received a letter from Patricia. She'd settled into her downtown condominium and was volunteering at a literacy center, finding purpose in helping others rather than managing family dynamics. She thanked me for forcing her to build an independent life and admitted that she'd been trying to recreate her first marriage where financial security came through managing her husband's assets rather than earning her own. Austin and his wife visited regularly, bringing their newborn daughter to the house where 4 generations of the family had now lived. The baby's nursery was in Austin's old room, surrounded by the same walls where Dad had read bedtime stories and taught basic math concepts. Melanie called every few weeks, updating me on her job and her new relationship. She discovered that she actually enjoyed working when the job matched her interests, and that earning her own money felt better than depending on family support. The house remained exactly as Dad had intended, a foundation for family, maintained by the person who understood both its practical and emotional value. The roses bloomed each spring, the fruit trees produced their annual harvest, and the garden provided the same peace it had offered Dad during his final years. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be displaced by people who mistake entitlement for ownership. Dad had spent 3 years ensuring that his home would be protected by the person who truly understood its worth. In the end, Patricia's assumption about blood relations versus chosen family had been her downfall. Dad had chosen his successor based on demonstrated commitment rather than biological connection. The legal documents I placed on the coffee table that day weren't just proof of ownership. They were proof that love and loyalty create stronger bonds than genetics and manipulation. The house stands as Dad intended, owned by the daughter who earned it through 15 years of responsibility, protected by the same legal expertise that now helps other families navigate complex property disputes. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to let entitled people take what they haven't earned. And when new neighbors ask about the beautiful Victorian house with the amazing garden, I tell them it's been in my family for over 20 years. Because family, I've learned, is defined by commitment and care, not by blood and assumption.
About the $3 million, I've made a decision to divide it between my mom and me. This decision came shortly after my father's funeral. Jack, after perusing the inheritance documents without seeking permission, remarked to me, "Kelly, don't be too greedy. Oh, finally, I can quit my job. I have to thank that doddering old man." Doddering old man? Are you talking about my dad? I inadvertently blurted out. Disregarding my confusion, Jack and my mother-in-law enthusiastically discussed plans to buy a new car and go shopping. Faced with this unexpected turn of events, I could no longer contain my emotions. I was on the brink of exploding, burdened with household chores, asked for money, and to top it off, they'd insulted my father. I didn't want to live with Jack and my mother-in-law anymore. Suppressing my anger, I forced a smile and replied, "Sure, feel free to use the money as you and my mother-in-law please. I am Kelly Cohan, a 38-year-old housewife working alongside my husband. My parents were doctors who ran a well-reputed clinic in our hometown. As an only child, I was showered with love. After graduating from the School of Pharmacy, I secured a job at a major pharmaceutical company. Although my parents were disappointed I didn't become a doctor, they respected my decision. 10 years ago, my mother unexpectedly died in an accident, leaving me and my father devastated. During those difficult times, Jack, then my boyfriend, supported me. We met through a mutual friend, and 2 years after my mother's passing, Jack proposed. Jack was an ordinary salaryman in the food and beverage industry. Despite earning significantly more, I believed we could overcome any difficulty and be a happy couple. My father was overjoyed when I told him about our engagement. "I've heard how Jack supported you, Kelly. Thank you so much. Please continue to take care of her," he said. Facing my father, Jack stood straight and promised, "I will make her happy." Standing next to Jack, I was enveloped in feelings of happiness. The following week, we went to Jack's family home to announce our marriage. His mother, with flashy makeup and divorced from Jack's father, evaluated me rudely. "Marriage, huh? You're Jack's choice, are you? Isn't she a bit plain for your choice? And she's older, right? Wouldn't a younger and prettier girl be better for you?" Jack quickly retorted, "Mom, you know M Pharmaceuticals, right? Kelly works there. Her father is a doctor and runs his practice." I expected Jack to praise my character, but instead, he emphasized the financial advantages. Hearing this, his mother's expression changed to one of satisfaction. "Oh, Jack, you should have told me such important things earlier." That changes everything. I happily approve of the marriage. "Nice to meet you, Kelly. Thank you." After gaining approval for our marriage from Jack's mother, Jack was overjoyed. However, I couldn't shake off a sense of unease. Despite things going smoothly, and our decision to get married, when we were about to register our marriage, my father, a doctor and real estate investor, gifted me an apartment in a luxury building in New York City. I told Jack, "Dad has given me this apartment as a wedding gift, but it's our new home. Let's live here happily and peacefully together." Jack smiled happily, and thus our married life began. However, after getting married, I realized something unsettling. Jack, who had lived with his parents until then, was almost incapable of doing household chores. He couldn't cook, didn't know how to use the washing machine, and showed no interest in learning. He would leave his garbage scattered around, not bothering to throw it away. While I wanted to diligently share household responsibilities, Jack's careless attitude increased my dissatisfaction. In the first year of marriage, I took on all the household responsibilities despite some complaints, given that we were still in the honeymoon phase. But with the exhaustion from work and struggling to keep up with chores, I reached my limit in our second year. Deciding to have a serious talk with Jack about sharing household duties, I bravely expressed my dissatisfaction. To my dismay, Jack responded without gratitude or reflection, saying, "I'm tired from work too. You're much better at chores than I am, right? It's better if you do them since I'm not good at it." Dismissed just like that, Jack hardly helped with the chores. and I continued to bear the brunt of our household responsibilities. But that wasn't the only problem. After marrying Jack, I discovered his mother also had some peculiar ideas. Jack wasn't very interested in seasonal events, so I decided to send a quality scarf and carnations to his mother for Mother's Day. Despite choosing a nice scarf from a department store, his mother called me sounding displeased. She criticized the scarf, saying it wasn't from a famous brand and was absurd to send such a no-name item. I tried to explain its quality, but she wouldn't listen, insisting she wanted items from a very famous luxury brand. Stunned, I reported this to Jack when he returned home. But instead of empathizing, he said, "What? It's just do as she said." Jack didn't take my side, and from then on, we started giving her cash as she demanded. Moreover, by our 5th year of marriage, she began visiting our home frequently, always finding reasons to ask for money. Jack, without any complaints, would always smile and give money to his mother. Even though I had a job, Jack's income was limited and small, making our daily life just barely manageable. Desperation led me to dip into our savings to cut living expenses. Despite my frustrations, I knew Jack cherished his mother, and she was an important person to me, having supported me during tough times. She's the mother of someone important to me, and with that thought, I endured. Now, in our 8th year of marriage, I continue to handle all the household chores and keep giving money to my mother-in-law. One day, during this routine, my father, whom I hadn't seen in a while, unexpectedly called me. The story he shared during our rare meeting was shockingly unexpected. He revealed that he was suffering from terminal cancer, and treatment was no longer possible. Overwhelmed with shock, tears spilled from my eyes. My father gently stroked my head, just as he did when I was a child, saying, "Kelly, this is fate. Let's accept it quietly." I questioned, "Dad, why even you?" Thus, my days became a juggling act of work, household duties, and now visits to my father's hospital. While work allowed some flexibility, managing the household was not easy. When I told Jack I would be caring for my father, he showed no reaction or willingness to help. "Well, it's tough with your father's sudden condition, but please do your best," was the only thing Jack said. He visited my father in the hospital only once. I was so preoccupied with my father's care that I had no time to spare for Jack. If I had time to worry about Jack, I wanted to prioritize my father. One day, as my father lay in his hospital bed, he suddenly asked me, "Kelly, how is your marriage with Jack going?" Caught off guard, I found myself thinking about Jack's attitude at home and his mother's behavior. I couldn't answer properly. Seeing my hesitation, my father seemed to understand and spoke to me, "Kelly, you don't have to endure. Think about your happiness. Don't worry. You won't have any hardships after I'm gone." I couldn't hold back my tears and wept, and my father silently and firmly held my hand. 3 months later, the inevitable moment arrived. My father passed away quietly. Engulfed in immense sorrow, I started arranging the funeral. Jack, however, showed no interest in my grief and didn't help with any preparations. Despite this, I was too busy with the funeral arrangements to pay much attention to Jack. Many friends and acquaintances attended my father's funeral, making it a heartfelt farewell. Even the indifferent Jack and his mother attended. The day after the funeral, I received a call from a lawyer about my father's inheritance. I arranged a meeting with the lawyer and listened to the explanation. The information was all new and quite surprising. After deducting taxes like inheritance tax, my father's estate amounted to over $3 million. He had not only earned income as a doctor, but also made real estate investments, leaving behind such a vast fortune, all of it to be inherited by me, his only daughter. Wrapped in surprise and gratitude, yet trembling at the thought of handling such a huge amount of money, I proceeded with the inheritance process. After returning home, I spread out the documents received from the lawyer on my desk. Reading through them, exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I ended up dozing off on the sofa for a short while. When I awoke, I heard the cheerful voices of Jack and his mother from afar. "Huh, Jack and Mother too. When did you come? As I spoke, Jack approached me with a beaming smile, saying, Yes, Kelly, well done. Huh, what? Confused by his sudden excitement. I noticed the documents in Jack's hand. They were the inheritance papers I had received from the lawyer. Wait, don't just read those without asking. Shocked and angry at Jack for looking through the documents without permission, I raised my voice at him. However, my mother-in-law, unconcerned, happily chimed in, Wow, an inheritance of $3 million. Isn't that amazing? Now we can live comfortably for the rest of our lives. Confused, I couldn't understand why my mother-in-law suddenly said that. Then Jack turned serious and continued, By the way, about this $3 million, I've decided that it will be split between me and my mom. It was right after my father's funeral. Jack, having looked at the documents related to the inheritance I was supposed to receive without permission, said to me, Kelly, don't be too greedy. Oh, now I can finally quit my job. I have to thank that doddering old man. Doddering old man, are you talking about my dad? I accidentally said it out loud. Well, anyway, let's proceed with the inheritance process and get the money into our joint account as soon as possible. Ignoring my confusion over this sudden turn of events, Jack and my mother-in-law were excitedly talking about buying a new car and shopping. At that moment, I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. I was on the verge of exploding, being burdened with household chores, asked for money, and to top it off, they insulted my father. While holding back my anger, I replied with a forced smile, Sure, use the money you and my mother-in-law, please, as you wish. Hearing this, my mother-in-law, seemingly satisfied, said cheerfully, That's the spirit, Kelly. Quick to agree. Now make sure you work hard and earn money. I don't want our savings to decrease, so work hard. I just nodded and pretended to listen to her selfish words. Afterward, Jack and my mother-in-law began living as if they had lost their minds, consuming money lavishly. Jack quickly quit his job, and my mother-in-law practically moved in with us, staying at our house constantly. They would leave in the morning, returning with luxury brand items they had splurged on. The 3-star restaurant we went to today wasn't as great as I expected. Yes, it was a bit underwhelming for us, the sophisticated ones. They had conversations as if they had become wealthy celebrities while dumping all the housework on me as if I were a maid. Jack seemed to think my father's inheritance would come through immediately. He carelessly withdrew money from our joint account, and my savings of $100,000 dwindled rapidly. When I protested their excessive spending, Jack just laughed it off. Huh, what are you talking about? Isn't $3 million coming soon? Then this kind of spending is no big deal. I warned him. I've already stopped it. But Jack completely ignored me. Then, a month later, Jack and my mother-in-law suddenly left for a trip to Hawaii. I wasn't invited and was left alone at home. After seeing them off, I decided to take action. About a week later, while I was relaxing at home, I heard a loud knock on the door, wondering what was happening. I glanced at the intercom monitor and saw Jack and my mother-in-law, both dressed in aloha shirts, standing at the front door. What do you want? I asked calmly and coldly. Red with anger, Jack yelled, What are you even talking about? Why won't the door open? Seeing Jack and my mother-in-law confused as to why the door wouldn't open, I confidently answered through the intercom. Well, I changed the locks on the door, so of course, it won't open. What? Why? Let's talk over this calmly at the nearby cafe. Please go ahead. I'll join you shortly, I suggested. Jack and his mother, after shouting in front of the entrance, seemingly realized it was futile and soon headed to the cafe. Once I confirmed they had left, I made my way to the cafe. Arriving there, I saw Jack and his mother, who had arrived earlier, waiting in a state of fury. Hey, what's this about? Did you change the locks? Hand over the new keys right now. There's no need for me to give you the new keys. You both need to leave that house, I calmly told Jack and his mother. Facing a visibly angry Jack, I presented a piece of paper. It was a divorce petition I had already filled out. Divorce? You're serious about divorcing me? His mother was equally shocked and bewildered. Kelly, why has it come to this? I spoke quietly to the two who were panicking and flustered. By the way you've been spending lavishly every day, are you sure your finances are okay? What money? Of course, it's fine, Jack retorted vehemently, spitting as he spoke. Your father's inheritance is coming, right? There should still be over $50,000 in our joint account. Look, I'll show you right now. Here it is. Saying this, Jack took out his smartphone and opened the banking app to check the account. At that moment, his expression changed abruptly. What? What's this? Why is the money gone? It was there just the other day. Hearing Jack's words, his mother also hurriedly looked at her phone, her face showing confusion. I revealed the truth to them as they were panicking, not understanding the situation. Of course, it's gone. I'm divorcing you. So I moved that $50,000 to my account as part of the property division. What? What do you mean? Jack's face turned to anger for a moment. But then he smirked, as if remembering something. Fine, I'll divorce you then. Transfer the inheritance you got from your dad right away. After all, property acquired during the marriage is split half and half in a divorce, right? Well, you might be misunderstanding something. I replied, why didn't you know? The inheritance I received, even though it was during our marriage, doesn't count for property division. There was a moment of silence between us. Then Jack and his mother's expressions changed drastically. Perhaps they truly believed they would receive part of my inheritance. I was just astonished and could only sigh in disbelief. No, that can't be true. That's impossible. Her face turned red with a mix of denial and anger. Please check for yourself, I said mockingly. Jack started frantically searching on his smartphone. It says here, property inherited by one spouse from a parent is considered separate property. Therefore, it's not subject to division and can't be split between the spouses. What? Seriously? His mother too looked at the screen in shock. Then Jack approached me, pleading desperately, Kelly, please don't divorce me. I have no savings and no job. How am I supposed to live if you divorce me? Faced with Jack's whining, I spoke to him clearly and firmly. What are you talking about? Take responsibility for your actions. I will never forget how you both treated me. I'm divorcing you. I'll go to court if I have to. Intimidated by my fierce demeanor, which they had never seen before, Jack and his mother shrunk back in fear, whimpering softly. Leaving the two of them dejected, I walked out of the cafe. Later on, Jack and I were able to go through the divorce proceedings without any issues. The $50,000 I had moved from our joint account was recognized as part of the marital property division. Eventually, I managed to get Jack and his mother out of my house. Jack, having already squandered the money from the property division, found himself penniless. Furthermore, he was overwhelmed with bills from the overseas trip and other expenses he had paid for with his credit card, quickly sinking into debt. Jack and his mother had to take on even more debt to make these payments, and they now live in a rundown apartment, working tirelessly every day to pay off their debts. The stark contrast to their former lavish lifestyle has been a huge shock for them. On the other hand, I sold the condo I used to share with Jack. I then moved into the apartment that used to belong to my father. I continue to work as before, but with the inheritance I received from my father, I am living a comfortable life financially. With gratitude to my late father in my heart, I want to start anew and cherish my life ahead. I aim to protect my happiness and spend my days peacefully.